Chapter 572. For Ein Mises, life in the Chaos Abyss was actually quite good. There were people serving her every day, which wasn't much for a supreme immemorial dragon like her. But compared to the boring daily routine in the mortal plane, there would be surprises every day in the Chaos Abyss. As a matter of fact, the lizard men came again early in the morning and danced a bunch of messy hula dances in front of him. They couldn't help but shout, "Great Dragon, Great Ancestor, protect us," and so on in the wrinkled dragon language. The one leading the shouting was an Inferno Kobold shaman. Although this creature knew the draconic language, it was limited by the structure of its tongue, so it wasn't very good. The lizardman's accent had the gloomy and tongue-like sounds of cold-blooded animals, which made it even more difficult to imitate. It had to be said that the strange draconic rapping, coupled with the lizard-men, ogres, and kobolds dancing a messy grass skirt ritual dance, was quite an amusing farce. Every day at dawn, Little Red would be able to enjoy such a strange comical performance, and she would always clap her hands in delight. For the lizard-men, being able to use a holy artifact to summon an immemorial red dragon was both a great surprise and a great fear. When the current generation's great shaman Mo discovered that the blood-red heartstone that had been passed down from generation to generation could actually be used to summon dragons, it was already an unexpected surprise for the entire lizardmen tribe. Together with the lizardmen's psychic witchcraft and beast-taming secret techniques, the lizardmen tribe's power increased explosively. However, this holy artifact actually managed to summon an immemorial red dragon just a few days ago. This was a great surprise to the lizardmen, to the point where they couldn't take it anymore. Evil dragons all had large appetite. It was precisely because of their powerful predatory instincts that they were able to become demon lords. A single territory wouldn't be able to support more than one dragon, even if it was a male and a female dragon. By the way, it was common for dragons to be stronger than male dragons. That was why it was quite normal for a male dragon to kick out a male dragon for the sake of mating. Since Dragon City was a gathering place for dragons, there would definitely be a large number of vassal species serving them. At the very least, the dragons wouldn't have to personally hunt for food. Even Little Red, who lived in Sulphur Mountain City, still had dozens of manticores and demon vultures under her command. The entire back mountain was her hunting ground. Alright then, after saying so much, I just wanted to prove one thing. Little Red's appetite was truly frightening. So what if he ate a lamb for a meal? Others ate a cow in one mouthful. This time, Little Red wasn't a volunteer soldier who brought her own rations. She didn't have any intention of saving up for her employer. Since she had hired a dragon, she should at least make sure that she was full. It wasn't easy to hunt in the Chaos Abyss, but this evil dragon was very picky about its food. It didn't eat creatures that were too highly demonized in the Chaos Abyss, and it even had to cook food with spices and seasonings. No matter if it was a hunter or a chef, they all faced the most severe test. The pitiful lizardmen tribe was currently using the entire tribe's rations to feed this terrifying dragon. It would have been fine if the Red Dragon Queen had only asked for food. However, the problem was that the Red Dragon Queen had even higher requirement. She even asked for wine. Wine was considered a luxury in the Chaos Abyss. However, a single barrel of strong wine that could last 10 dwarves for a week would only take a single sip for the Red Dragon Queen. Not only that, this Red Dragon Queen's alcohol tolerance was ridiculously high. Whenever someone treated her to a meal, she would ask for more than 100 barrels of wine. In the morning, she would drink several dozen barrels of wine. In a way, it could be said that Ein Mises was living even more freely than in the mortal plane now that the alcohol restriction had been lifted. It was just that the lizardmen tribe had to suffer. The Bloodspear lizardmen leader, Grey Blade, did some careful calculations. If the Red Dragon Queen really had a falling out with her, considering how powerful the Red Dragon Queen was when she fought against that powerful Holy Knight, not even his entire tribe would be a match for her. The end result was that his entire tribe became the immemorial Red Dragon's subordinate. They worked hard to serve her. They hunted wild animals for her and purchased wine for her. They were even afraid that she would be bored to the point of looking for something to do, so they organized sacrificial ceremonies and dance performances for her to relieve her boredom. Why did the god equipment left behind by our ancestors summon such a powerful dragon? Weren't there only a few dragon beasts before? Even ordinary black dragons don't listen to this god equipment's summon. Why did an immemorial red dragon come? It was a stone heart that was as large as a person. It was so lifelike that it seemed alive. However, it was covered in a layer of stone that looked like scales. 10 years ago, Greyblade, who wasn't the tribe leader at the time, accidentally discovered the wondrous use of this god equipment. As long as he dripped a drop of blood on the stone, the heart would tremble slightly as if it was beating like a real heart. It would give off mystical vibrations that would attract nearby dragon beasts to listen to the god equipment's owner's commands. And so, Greyblade, who had obtained the god equipment's golden finger, was continuously promoted. He became the CEO and married a beautiful, rich, and beautiful woman. He killed the previous tribe leader, married the previous tribe leader's second wife, and became the new tribe leader. It would seem that the lizardmen's relationships were quite chaotic as well. But soon, Greyblade discovered the limitations of this god equipment. While it was quite attractive to low-level dragon beasts, it would only give a slight favorable impression to higher-level dragon beasts. Any higher-level dragon beasts wouldn't be able to respond to the god equipment at all. In fact, it would be quite easy to cause a disaster for the lizardmen. Fortunately, or perhaps unfortunately, no matter how much blood was poured on the heart, the dragons wouldn't even look at it. In fact, the blood would even make the dragons feel uncomfortable and have the effect of driving them away. And now, this god equipment actually summoned an immemorial red dragon, and an incredibly friendly red dragon queen at that. This was the same as casually spending $2 to win a grand prize of 30 million. Happiness came so quickly that it was almost unbelievable. I am the tribe leader chosen by the heavens. I shall rule over this entire dimension. Back then, Greyblade had been so high-spirited and ambitious. But now, Greyblade was quite confused as he stood in front of the altar. Back then, he had been overjoyed when he saw Mises and his ambition to rule over the entire dimension. Now, he was filled with endless regret. It wasn't necessarily a good thing to summon such a strong fighter. Tribe leader, if we continue like this, our winter food, I got it. Let them continue purchasing it. If it's not enough, then go steal some more from the mushroom men. Right, purchase some more magical meat. That dragon doesn't want to eat it, so we can keep it for winter. Tribe leader, we don't have enough alcohol again. Go buy some at the Onababa market. Do we have any more soul coins in the storeroom? Tribe leader, the red dragon thinks that our dancing ogres are too ugly. She thinks that the old shaman's singing is terrible. Go to the Onababa market and buy some pretty slaves. Elves are the best. The hunting team should go look for some as well. What are you all standing around for? Go look for some. Tribe leader, speak. Greyblade was so angry that he was on the verge of exploding. But when he thought about the red dragon's sharp fingernails that were even larger than his own and the red dragon's terrible reputation, he could only endure it. The red dragon said that she wants to eat a barbecued death bull for lunch. Also, she thinks that it's too noisy and wants someone to sing her lullaby. Right, she thinks that living on the mountain is too simple and crude. She wants to know when her dragon cave will be finished. At this moment, Greyblade really wanted to throw down his throne as the tribe leader. What was a death bull? It was a legend-ranked creature that would kill anyone it glared at. An immemorial red dragon could be considered a delicacy, but could lizard men hunt it? Dragon cave? An immemorial red dragon's dragon cave? Even selling off the Bloodspear tribe probably wouldn't be enough. Lullaby? That seemed possible. Greyblade shook his head. It would be better if fewer people knew about this embarrassing matter. Gritting his teeth, he decided to get up and personally sing a lullaby to the Red Dragon. Tribe leader. What now? Can't you all make your own decisions? Finally, Greyblade exploded. But then, he noticed that the lizard man had a terrified expression as he pointed at something not far away. That super strong holy knight from the other day is coming. Chapter 573. I yawned as I looked at the hundreds of lizardmen surrounding me. I couldn't even muster up the energy to do so. Little Red, your mom's calling you home for dinner. And so, I propped myself up and shouted out some strange words. With the amplification spell, my voice echoed throughout the entire valley. Go home for dinner. Go home for dinner. Although it sounded ridiculous, I knew that Little Red could understand me. I directly called her by her nickname and called her home for dinner. I told her that I was tired of her and that she should hurry up and deal with her problems so that we could continue on our way. Damned Holy Knight! You actually dare to humiliate us while we're in a weakened state? My servants, I need power. God equipment. Hurry, hurry, give me the god equipment of dragons. Not only did she understand me, she even took advantage of the opportunity to force the lizardmen to hand over the god equipment. An earth-shattering dragon roar reverberated throughout the world. It sounded quite majestic, but if one thought about the content of the roar, it was obvious that she was trying to take advantage of the lizardmen's misfortune. It seems that I'll have to cooperate with her for one last time. I yawned again as I glanced at the cowering lizardmen guards beside me. Then, I raised my battle hammer and began summoning a wave-like wave of holy light. Evil! Your end has arrived. Despicable lizardmen, let me cleanse your sins. The judgment of the Hades awaits you. Evil dragon, you'll be next. The holy light shall prevail. A powerful pillar of light with a frightening aura pierced through the clouds, dyeing even the clouds in the color of holy light. My power level had increased once again from saint to myth rank. My double diamond bloodline and physical body contained a powerful soul. The soul represented the ability to excavate the essence and level of one's power. Plus, I had a powerful bloodline and physical body that could withstand power. The current me was far stronger than a Mullo cough. I meant that I was far stronger than Emperor Yongye from back in the day. Even if Emperor Yongye from back in the day appeared in front of me, I was confident that I could defeat him one-on-one. It'd be strange if an undead mage didn't bring his underlings to fight you one-on-one. The silly cat decisively retorted, but she also reminded me of her existence. And so, I picked her up, tossed her out, and loudly shouted her lines. Come out, Angel Beast! Angel Beast Super Evolution! Holy Angel Beast! And so, the cat ball kept changing shape as it rolled in the air. In a flash of blinding holy light, a divine angel beast wearing shameful clothes appeared. Forced transformation was really useful. Heloise is really useful. Roland, just you wait. Through our soul connection, I completely ignored her hysterical roars. There were plenty of high-level holy knights who were capable of summoning angel incarnations. However, this would typically require a contract with the corresponding angel. When considering my relationship with the holy light, I would rather just quietly be a solitary handsome knight. If you really wanted to be a holy angel beast, then I could just do it myself and transform into a holy angel beast. The angel beast's appearance was quite nice. It was a classic design with the angel beast as the template and the image of a female angel in my memory. It was quite pleasing to the eye. As for the extra fluffy cat ears, would anyone believe me if I said it wasn't my personal hobby? Glaring at me? Glaring at me? If you stare at me again, I'll turn you into a Tyrannosaurus mecha next time. Even though she angrily glared at me, Heloise still completed the task that I gave her well. It wouldn't be wrong to say that she completed it. After all, tossing her out to be a target for taunting didn't require any special abilities. Before the Holy Knight even attacked, the Holy Angel he summoned charged over first. When the residents of the Chaos Abyss recalled the legends of these terrifying creatures on the bloody battlefield, they were unable to maintain their calm and instinctively attacked. Arrows, witchcraft, and longswords. In that instant, Heloise received the warmest treatment from the residents of the Chaos Abyss. However, get out of my way. I never expected that Heloise would have such a heroic side to her. She directly ignored the Holy Angel Beast's attacks and transformed into a meteor that flew horizontally. She left a trail of light in the air as she broke through countless obstacles as if she were a barbarian king. Don't be fooled by how I always treated her as a cute cat ball or something. Actually, Heloise was quite useful. Ever since Heloise was still a slime incarnation, her defensive abilities had already been astonishing. Slimes had powerful absorption abilities and were immune to physical damage. She was a magical pet designed to be used as a meat shield. And now that I had reached half myth rank, this meant that I had removed all of her restrictions. Heloise was now close to her peak strength. Last time, I took a look at her stamina stat. According to my system's calculations, her stamina stat had actually exceeded 50, far surpassing Little Red's. How frightening was this stat! Although she also had 0 talent in melee combat, it would be impossible to kill her without some skill. It would seem that I can develop even more new abilities for her in the future. Cat shield, cat helmet, cat straw doll, cat inflatable doll. Let me talk about the straw doll that borrowed arrows from the straw boat. I'm going to fight you to the death. The angel beast flew back and sent a group of people flying again. When it was only 1 foot away from me, I smiled and snapped my fingers. Meow? And then, the furious and vengeful angel beast transformed into a cute pet cat that threw itself at its master. Meow meow meow. What did you do to me? Why can I only meow like a cat? Cough, I definitely didn't upgrade you while you were asleep. It seems that this ability is still working normally. Don't complain. You are now an epic-ranked half-undead. Who knows how much longer this magical pet contract can restrict you? This is just a necessary safety measure. Meow 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 meow. Roland, you damned bachelor. Serves you right for being alone for the rest of your life. What? I don't understand cat language. Meow 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 meow. Then how did you understand me just now? Humph, other than complaining, what else can you do? Depression, displeasure, anger. Finally, Heloise exploded. She pounced on Roland's head and started biting. Roland actually instantly put on the +12 enchanted metal helmet. He had actually been holding onto the metal helmet all this while. How shameless, cough smart. It seemed that he had long prepared for this. Meow 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 meow. This time, it was really a cat meowing in despair. Or I should say a cat crying. Heloise was crying. The Queen of Banshees was actually crying. Roland had done something great again. He had won. He had obtained a complete victory in his battle against his pet cat. He was currently riding on his pet cat and proudly showing off his victory. All around him were lizard men who were astonished to see him. Don't be fooled by him. Have you forgotten about the magical pet contract? He can understand. Finally, even the system couldn't bear to watch this cat tease anymore. While Roland was still teasing his pet cat, 2 unfamiliar visitors arrived at the Serpent God's palace in the same dimension. Judging from how respectful the Serpent God's main body was, these 2 visitors were both incredibly important figures. Their arrival also meant that Roland's leisure time had come to an end. Roland missed the Devil Lord. I heard that there's news about him here. Chapter 574. Perhaps the world still didn't know about the Battle of the Hades, but it was so widespread and far-reaching that it was destined to be recorded in HE's history. The rise of a new third faction, the Order faction, was split, and the Chaos faction lost the will of Chaos and several Chaos main gods. Obviously, none of the factions were the winners. However, among all the losers, there was one faction that definitely suffered the greatest losses. That was the devils. The most ancient devil lords had all defected. Half of the 9 devil lords had left, along with more than half of the immemorial devils. The devils that had survived for so many years were all elites and core members of the devil hierarchy. It would have been fine if only the foundational and core members had left, but the most ridiculous part was that the high-level combat strength had been greatly reduced. Originally, as the strongest faction in the lower planes, the devils were far less numerous than the demons. However, 3 of their 9 devil lords were main god-level existences, which made the other factions incredibly fearful of them. The Lord of Lies Camilcias, the Lord of Despair Heimer, and the Lord of Tyranny Sarwinston were all famous sources of evil in all the planes. But now 2 of them had actually joined the Hades faction, along with 2 other devil lords. The entire devil faction now only had 1 main god-level devil lord, Sarwinston, and 4 lower-level devil lords. Saying that their overall strength had been halved would be a consolation. What did it mean for 2 of the 3 main gods to have left? Not to mention that Sarwinston and his faction were the weakest among the devil lords to begin with. It could be said that the high-level combat strength had instantly collapsed. And this was only the first wave. The immemorial devils had left in large numbers. Many well-organized organizations had lost their leaders and core members, becoming nothing more than empty shells. The devils' expertise in scheming and organization had been completely crippled. The devils' overall combat strength was probably less than 20% of what it had been 7 years ago. The lower planes weren't some peaceful and loving place. If a faction suddenly weakened, what awaited them definitely wouldn't be peaceful and loving assistance. Instead, they would be hungry wolves with ill intentions. Even though the devils had reacted as quickly as possible and furiously retracted their defenses. Even though they had the most outstanding organization in all the planes and were extremely obedient, they still suffered tremendous losses in this calamity. Not only that, the primordial devil's betrayal of the entire Chaos faction caused them to instantly lose the protection and blessings of the Chaos Abyss. This was why many places in the old hell collapsed and dimensional cracks appeared. Some of the powerful devils that relied on the blessings of the Chaos Abyss to grow even lost power levels. Demons were not good people. When they realized that their partners had suddenly become so much weaker, several of the demon overgods were tempted. And so, a feast of slaughter began. The hosts were the demons and the chaos evil gods, and the guests they invited even included order battle gods. Both sides tacitly agreed to divide up the devil's territory and resources. After this feast for the other residents of the Chaos Abyss, all the strategic fortresses in the first few layers of the Chaos Abyss were lost. Nearly half of the Chaos Abyss's dimensional portals were seized. All the surviving devils retreated to the old hell. The devils were suddenly reduced from the most powerful faction in the Chaos Abyss to a lower middle faction. When considering the accumulated grudges from the Chaos Abyss's glorious era, a phoenix without its feathers was no better than a chicken. This mid-sized faction would have a difficult time. Those with grudges would take revenge, while those without grudges would take some of the spoils. For the devils that had survived the calamity, their lives had become more and more difficult over the past few years. They naturally hated the devil lords that had betrayed their trust the most. Actually, many people felt that it was ridiculous to talk about trust since devils viewed betrayal and deceit as their glory. However, devils would also have grudges and take out their anger on others. However, 3 of the former devil lords had now become the devil lords of the Hades. If they wanted revenge, they would have to defeat the Hades. All their grudges were transferred to the final devil lord, Ilmigia, the Queen of Temptations. Ilmigia was the most outstanding double agent in history. She had betrayed both the Chaos Abyss and the Hades. Now, she was living quite well under the protection of the Abyss Prince Cavendish. Even if the devils wanted revenge, they would have to ask Cavendish for permission. The current Cavendish was one of the most popular individuals in the Chaos Abyss. The devils weren't confident that they could provoke the current Chaos Prince. However, if they didn't take revenge, his subordinates would lose their morale. Indeed, it was quite inconceivable that the entire devil species' morale was so low. In fact, some devils would often choose to give up on their past accumulations and transform into demons. The entire species was wavering in the wind and rain. They really needed some good news to cheer them up. This time, the devils encountered an opportunity. Cavendish's older brother, Roland, has come to the Chaos Abyss. If we use him as a hostage, we should be able to exchange for Ilmigia. From a certain standpoint, this was indeed logical. However, if Roland knew that he was being hunted down by devils because of Cavendish's woman, he would probably feel quite awkward. And from a different standpoint, Roland was the main reason why the devils were declining, as he was the mastermind behind the entire Hades. Taking revenge on him wouldn't be wrong at all. Snake God Voka, we respect your authority over this dimension, but please don't make things too difficult for us. Even if our species isn't in a good situation right now, we still have enough power to interfere with the nearby dimensions. The speaker was a large, one-eyed man. Half of his body was abnormally muscular and was tied up in heavy black chains. The other half of his body was as thin as a dwarf's, but he carried a sawtooth battle axe. He was the devil species blood war general, the berserk slaughter demon Sailor. As a devil, Sailor wasn't a good one. That was because he didn't know how to lie or betray others. But on the other hand, the reason why he was able to survive for so long in the Devil's Society was because of his pure combat achievements and vicious killing intent. After all, if the commander of an entire army was a sly one, there would be no need to fight. 7 years ago, Sailor had been the overall commander of the Blood War Fortress, a major individual comparable to the ruler of a dimension. But now, not only had he lost his fortress, he had lost his position as the Blood War commander. Even his right leg had been replaced with a metal prosthetic leg. He could be said to be half-crippled. Even so, Sailor still aggressively requested the Snake God's assistance, as if he were the true ruler of this dimension. Snake God Voka's true body was several meters long. Even though he was currently in human form, his icy gaze could still instantly kill any mortal. He looked just like a rattlesnake that was 3 meters tall in human form. His 3-meter-tall body was covered in golden scales. Although he looked rather similar to lizardmen, he was definitely not the same species. The snake god remained silent as he faced the devil's aggressive attitude. He didn't want to help the devils, even though the devils had already made incredibly tempting promises to him. You don't have to think too much. We just need you to help us gather information. Leave the rest to us. Even if that person is so domineering and arrogant. No matter how arrogant that person is, we won't make trouble for you. That's right, Voka wasn't interested in Roland's life or death at all. He was only weighing the rewards he could obtain, as well as the possible risks, the risks of offending Cavendish. The Abyss Prince was now one of the strongest existences in the Chaos Abyss. He was also famous for being willful. He had already killed more than a dozen demon lords. It was obviously not worth it to offend the Abyss Prince for the sake of the devils who were already weak. This is the Devil Lord's will? I am the Devil Lord. I represent the will of all the Devil Lords, including Sarwinston. And this time, the famous slaughter maniac Sailor wasn't even the commander of this expedition. The one who was truly in charge was the cold devil flower under the cloak, Lord of Curses, Lasnina. Lasnina had previously been the Queen of Temptations, Ilmigia's close friend and lover. But now, she had personally injured the beautiful goddess of vengeance. Lasnina's appearance meant that the devils were coming out in full force. They were willing to pay any price to capture Roland. Unfortunately, Voka refused to budge. It was obvious that the devils weren't willing to give him enough bargaining chips. He wouldn't act until he saw what he wanted. If the devils were searching for Roland in the mortal plane themselves, even if Voka didn't interfere, the devils would only be able to find a needle in a haystack since they didn't have enough manpower. Suddenly, snake god Voka stopped. His snake head actually revealed an astonished expression. My priest is praying for my power? A human holy knight from the Chaos Abyss? Chapter 575. My summoning holy light lit up the entire sky. Above the clouds, the illusions of angels and dragons kept clashing. Just the overflowing power kept blowing away the surrounding clouds. This was an incredibly intense battle. But actually, under the cover of the holy light, I secretly told Little Red my new plan. That means we need to change our plans. We need to hurry to the 100th floor and meet up with Adam and the others. It's been so long, and Marguerite should have brought that idiot with her. Then, we'll go look for that sun god from the previous generation. I didn't intend to slowly play around with the local residents. I had already stayed in this damp and cold swamp of the Chaos Abyss for almost a month. Mushrooms were already growing on my boot. Considering the weather in this damned place, it was likely that they were poisonous mushrooms. A god equipment. Towards my request, Little Red's reply was simple and direct. She stared at the lower left side from the corner of her eyes. There, the red-eyed lizardman chief was still hopping about, as if he was very anxious seeing that his red dragon was at a disadvantage. It seemed that Little Red had completely set her eyes on the god equipment that could control dragons. What she meant was that she definitely wouldn't leave until she helped me obtain the god equipment. What's that? I was rather curious. Little Red was no newbie who had never seen a god equipment before. What god equipment could tempt her to such an extent? It's highly likely that it's the heart of some supreme immemorial dragon god. Perhaps some ancient dragon god died in the Chaos Abyss. That heart is quite suitable for me. It's likely that the heart contains that dragon god's knowledge and experience. I immediately came to a realization. Dragons were famous for their long lifespans, but they were also famous for their slow progress. Apart from wasting time, they could also cultivate on their own. Of course, they wouldn't let go of any opportunity to improve themselves. Dragons' growth process was slightly special. They were also capable of transforming their concepts into actual, myth-ranked weapons. But for them, what precious material could possibly compare to their own unique physical bodies? Their enhanced concepts would often be fused together with some part of their physical body. When a dragon died, their bones and flesh would rot over time. However, the organs that had once contained their concepts would usually be preserved for an incredibly long time. This was why the corpse of a powerful dragon was a treasure. The inheritance of a dragon king or dragon god would be worth tens of millions of gold coins. During this period of time, Little Red had figured out the nature of the god tool, and it felt that this was a rare opportunity. However, it didn't dare to use force, and it became more and more restrained. The lizardman's altar where the heart was stored was guarded 24 hours a day, and there were even witchcraft curses and alarms. They weren't of the same system, so it was very difficult to completely remove them. If the lizardman destroyed the heart as soon as he approached, he wouldn't even have tears left to cry. The lizardmen won't be able to destroy that thing, right? Who knows? Just in case. It wasn't easy for me to get my hands on the dragon's eye of the primordial dragon, but it shot it at me with a powerful kick. When I got it back, it became a football. I was so sad. Is that why you hung and for half a night? If it was me, I would have already thrown that brat into the frying pan. Stop bragging. You're even better at spoiling children. Do you still intend to drag things out with Eliza like this? If you don't make up your mind and make a decision, be careful that you don't cross the line. In the end, you'll end up with that knife? Hatchet. I couldn't help but smile wryly when I heard this. I could still deal with other things, but I really couldn't deal with such a messy situation. Fortunately, Eliza was still in the land of spring. I could drag things out a little longer and hope that she could understand me, understand? She probably understood me long ago. She's just unwilling to let go. By the way, are you guys acting like this? Aren't we at war? Why are you talking about children's education? Even if you're acting, shouldn't you at least be a little more serious? Everyone, be more serious. We're at war. Finally, I couldn't bear to watch any longer. That wasn't a typo, so why was it a hat? Ever since I finished teasing the cat, I had never pulled out its sharp teeth from my head. From afar, it looked like a cat-eared hat was on my head. However, it was actually so painful that I had to constantly cast holy light on my head. If this was an online game, not only would I suffer from the debuff of bleeding, I would also receive constant damage notifications of -1 and -1, and occasionally, a green +167 would also pop up. I was fighting from afar in the sky because I had this flying guillotine on my head, so I probably wouldn't be able to be serious no matter what. And now, Harlowe's reminder indeed made me remember what I needed to do. I needed to quickly obtain Little Red's heart and then hurry up and leave this dimension. For some unknown reason, I kept feeling like I was being targeted by something. This was an instinctive, ominous feeling. A powerful individual's instincts could sometimes be a type of weapon. My premonitions of misfortune were also incredibly accurate. Is this your personal experience as a jinx? Or is it your instincts of being hunted down? Shut up and obediently go be your hat. My head hurt from all the biting, and I cast some more holy light on myself. I rubbed my chin, which was finally starting to have some hair, and made my decision. The best way to obtain a complete heart is to have them deliver themselves to me. Then, he smiled at Little Red and understood everything in his heart. Damned holy night and god of holy light, they're actually forcefully descending into the chaos abyss. Right in front of the audience, a shadow giant projected by holy light on the clouds summoned a gigantic sword that viciously slashed at the dragon's body. The red dragon screamed in pain as blood gushed out like rain and directly fell down. The next moment, the holy light giant looked down below. A white light streaked through the sky and swiftly descended like a meteor. Tribe leader. Boom. The lizardman's screams mixed with the sound of an explosion. When the smoke dissipated, a large crater appeared between the lizardmen leader's feet. The lizardmen leader had a terrified expression as he looked down. He had been just 1 meter away from being smashed into smithereens. The lizardmen leader's position, as well as all the beautiful lizardmen females, had all been taken advantage of by someone else. The lizardmen leader raised his head and saw that the holy knight with wings of light seemed to be glaring at him. It was as if a magical beast was inspecting its prey that had just escaped. The lizardmen leader's obvious killing intent seemed to be right next to him even though he was so far away. He instantly felt a chill down his spine as he trembled all over. Hurry, give it to her. Give her that heart. The lizardmen leader had done his calculations. If he died right now, he would probably have nothing left. If he could help the red dragon defeat the holy knight, then even if the red dragon decided to turn against him, at least he would still be alive. Boom. Boom. Several more grenades of holy light descended and exploded everywhere. This time, it seemed to be an AoE attack. Hurry and give it to her. The lizardmen anxiously roared as they moved on all fours. In just a short instant, the grayish-white heart stone was sent to where the red dragon had fallen. Of course, the holy knight wouldn't just watch as the lizardmen succeeded. At this moment, 4 adult black dragons suddenly flew down from the clouds and spat out a lethal green breath at the holy knight. Alright, they were putting on an act. Even the extras had appeared. As long as the lizardmen lost their god equipment, the summoned dragons would naturally disperse, and their ambition to rule over the mortal plane would become nothing more than a bubble. And as long as I completed this mission, I would be able to find the dwarves who would no longer have to worry about me and leave this mortal plane. Hurry and give it to me. I'll be able to, just as Little Red was about to obtain the god equipment that she had been dreaming of, two tall figures wearing capes appeared in the sky. You actually found it so easily? Perhaps even the assassins hadn't expected that they would be so lucky. Or perhaps I should say that Roland had such bad luck. Chapter 576. From the very start, we had been observing the demon priest, who was currently praying to the snake god. He had been constantly summoning divine arts, but nobody took him seriously. That was because the Chaos Evil gods were fundamentally different from the Order god. The Chaos Evil gods were primordial gods that could advance on their own, and didn't rely too much on the power of belief. But on the other hand, they also lacked a sense of responsibility towards their believers. That's right, a sense of responsibility. Although it sounded rather strange, there would often be some sort of contract or mysterious relationship between the gods and mortal believers. The Order gods and their believers were just like a registered, formal company. The benefits and treatment were all clear, and the company's business, spirit, and rules were all clear. There was even room for improvement. If the priests did an excellent job, the company's performance would increase, and the god company's power level would increase by another level. The believers and priests would also receive God's blessing, places to spread their religion, and authority in return. But if the company collapsed or the god died, all the employees would naturally lose their jobs. And in this aspect, the Chaos Evil gods who were no longer bound by order and rules were completely different. The Chaos Evil gods and their evil cultists were just like a secret illegal black company. The boss wouldn't set any clear rules, and everything would be decided by him alone. Meanwhile, the company's goal was to make the boss rich and improve himself. The employees were nothing more than tools with no guarantees. This highlighted the foundational difference between the Chaos Evil gods and the Order god. The Order gods were like legal companies that competed in the market. Apart from very few situations, they had to compete legally according to the rules, competing on management, and so on. But, rather than having the Chaos Evil gods' illegal companies operate, it would be better to directly rob them. Stealing a divine concept, divinity, and devouring a weak god would be more effective than the Order gods' thousands of years of accumulation. That was why the Chaos Evil gods were far more aggressive than the Order gods. In such a situation, the great majority of evil gods viewed their believers as useful tools, or more accurately, slaves that voluntarily offered sacrifices to them. As long as their goal was achieved, who would care about whether the tools were good or bad? Just look at Rose from back in the day. Not a single Order god would allow their worshippers to kill each other, as that would reduce the total amount of faith in them. Yet, Rose only hoped for the strongest chess pieces. She would bestow divine favor upon murderers and slaughterers, and punish the weak and kind. She viewed the elven gods as her mortal enemies and prey. Therefore, believing in an evil god could make one rich overnight, as long as one was to the big boss's liking and was appreciated by the big boss. However, there was also a possibility that one would become a pawn in an evil god's scheme and die mysteriously. As far as I know, 99% of the cases where you become rich overnight, you've already stepped into the evil god's chess game and can't extricate yourself. Those old and cunning fellows will never make a losing deal. The infighting between them is extremely intense. Both sides are competitors, but also prey. Perhaps the most pitiful of all would be the soul black contract. Even if you died, your soul would still have to report to the evil god. At that time, the evil gods would determine whether you would be transformed into a god's servant, devil, demon, or something like that, or directly converted into soul coins, snacks, or raw materials. In essence, the Order gods and the Chaos Evil gods were all the same. They only pursued their own personal benefit. Who would care about the lives of mortals? It was just like how both sides chased after personal benefit. The only difference was that one side was a bit nicer and focused on long-term business, while the other side didn't have any restrictions or obstacles and dared to do anything. However, the risks were also high and the benefits came and went quickly. As we travel through the abyss, we naturally have to deal with the evil gods of chaos. The snake god's information was no secret. He was the guardian god of snake demons, snake people, and lizard men. He was also the god of poison. His true form was probably a gigantic venomous snake from ancient times. His combat experience wasn't particularly outstanding, and his attack power was the weakest among all the evil gods. However, he had lived for a long time, and that was the strongest sign of all. The Chaos Abyss was no friendly place. I didn't want to provoke such an ancient artifact. Who knew what trump cards he had hidden up his sleeves? However, his cautious personality made me feel much more reassured. As for the snake god's believers praying to the snake god's power, I had killed so many lizard men over the past few days that I could fill a warehouse with them. Yet, I hadn't seen a single lizard man that actually managed to summon an evil god's power. If the snake god's believers met with an enemy that was beyond their abilities, the evil god's believers would be able to pray to the evil god for divine blessings that exceeded the norm. However, the evil god wouldn't even bother to pay attention to them if they didn't have sufficient benefits. This mortal plane was filled with snake demons and lizard men. The snake god had dozens of believers, so the snake god wouldn't care much for his believers here. If this was the mortal plane, the death of a single high-level priest would be a major loss. Not only would the snake god lose face, but it would also be quite likely that the snake god would help if the snake god's believers in the mortal plane met with a calamity. This place was quite close to the snake god's main body, and it was quite dangerous. Lizard men were dying every day. Although the signal here was quite good, it was almost impossible for the snake god's believers to respond to their prayers. Perhaps this was why the snake god's main body was so important to the snake god's embassy. There weren't many people here, and it was a matter of face. Ahem, let's stop here for now. Things had been quite tense recently, so I shouldn't try to die too much. So, when I saw the gigantic cyan blue snake in the sky, my first reaction was that I was hallucinating. My second reaction was that I discovered that my luck had been running out for far too long. It was likely that my luck had been running out for several hundred years already. Damn it, I can't be so unlucky, can I? The situation is tense. Retreat. Let's take the goods and leave first. Due to our many years of tacit understanding, we instantly came to an agreement. I tossed out a sword of light that nailed the lizard man shaman who was holding the heart stone. This time, I didn't miss at all. Little Red, who had just been howling on the ground, instantly stood up and leaped towards the lizard man shaman. She then grabbed the heart stone and swallowed it. Just as she was about to spread her wings and fly away, I unhesitatingly fled first. I could sense that the snake had already locked onto me. Challenging an evil god's main body in an evil god's private mortal plane would be no different from challenging an evil god's main body in a true god's divine kingdom. I didn't want to die so arrogantly. However, the next instant I was blocked by a figure. It was a female demon general who was more than 3 meters tall. Her black scale armor was covered in scars, and the chain sword she held in her right hand was also covered in blood. She viciously glared at me as if I was the person who had killed her father. If it wasn't for the scars on her face, she would definitely be considered a beauty. But right now, the viciousness and naked hatred in her eyes made me feel rather confused. Do we know each other? I don't remember offending you. Miss, what's your surname? It's your emotional debt again. Do you even remember the woman you offended? Harlois's words made me feel rather guilty. When I really tried to compare my past memories with hers, I still didn't find anything. Kawan si. Every single word she squeezed out was filled with intense hatred. Her blood-red eyes were filled with nothing but hatred and regret. So it was all Cavendish's fault. What the hell was wrong with me? How did I get hit like this? Wait a moment, although we look very similar, take a closer look. I'm a human, while Cavendish is a demon. Before I even finished speaking, countless red chains sealed off the sky. The female demon general unhesitatingly attacked, while wielding her magic sword. Damn it, even this is related to me. She was already attacking me. What else could I do? Fight. I suddenly unsheathed my ice sword and blocked the formless chain magic sword. The enemy before me gave me a lot of pressure. She wouldn't be an opponent that I could easily deal with. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed that the snake god didn't seem to intend on interfering. Little Red was also blocked by a deformed demon general. Judging from his strange appearance, he was probably the slaughter maniac demon sailor, the devil general from the first level of the Chaos Abyss. In that case, it was quite obvious who my opponent was when I combined this god equipment that reeked of blood and curses, as well as the countless wailing souls on top of it. Lasnina, the Lord of Curses. The next instant, the entire sky was ignited by holy light. This wasn't an act. It would be incredibly foolish to hold anything back in front of a devil lord. My holy light wings completely exploded, and the ice sword in my hand was replaced by a god equipment war hammer. The holy light I spat out transformed into a sun-like source of light. Holy light, this enemy is worth fighting. There was no need for a reason or an excuse. She was already an enemy to begin with. Since the Devil Lord was already right in front of her, she wouldn't be afraid of anyone if she wanted to fight. Chapter 577. Misfortune always descends from the heavens. I lowered my head and blinked. Even the corners of my eyes hurt from the wind caused by my sword. My opponent this time was indeed quite difficult to deal with. The magic sword Sastia, also known as the Snake Tail Whipper, was a god equipment, and its effects were right before my very eyes. I could hear the screams of ghosts and wolves. These were the screams of the vengeful spirits that died to this god equipment. This god equipment itself was a type of mental attack that targeted the soul. If you didn't have any defensive abilities in this area, or if you were distracted by it during an intense battle, then you would soon become one of these vengeful spirits. As the battle progressed, the sword would make snake-like sounds and distort, and these vengeful spirits would get closer and closer to your mind. The moment you revealed an opening, the moment you began listening to their past, would be the moment of your death. Yet, this was only the most inconspicuous aspect of this god equipment of slaughter. Perhaps it should be said that far too many lives had died to this sword. Far too much hatred and resentment was wrapped around this sword, which was why it was cursed. Holy light, allow these pitiful souls to return to peace. The light of salvation materialized and fell on my head, turning into a crown of light. The holy light above his head began to radiate in all directions. It was redeeming the dead souls. This was the light of salvation from the Lord of Redemption. The wronged souls that were contaminated by it screamed and fled. They either dissipated on the spot and reincarnated, or were forced back into the divine artifact. Lasnina seemed to notice that her ability was countered. The next instant she changed her combat style. Her magic sword suddenly shook several times in a row and lengthened yet again. Then, all I could see was blood-red blades. Countless chains and blades were everywhere. Numerous black chains sealed off the entire sky. This magic sword was actually capable of creating a sword net that blocked off the entire sky. Holy light, cleanse this cursed magic sword. I loudly shouted for holy light as I threw my battle hammer, which viciously collided with the magic sword's extended blade. After this clash, it was Lasnina's turn to have an unpleasant expression. She could feel that her divine weapon, the demonic sword, was wailing and crying for help. It was actually being permanently weakened with every clash. This is holy light? Finally, Lasnina, who had attacked the moment they met, finally stopped. She spoke for the first time since she met me. However, the answer to her confusion was a spear of holy light that suddenly descended from the clouds and viciously exploded in front of her. Boom! Boom! The continuous explosions showed the powerful attack power. This was the pure holy light. I had missed my holy light spear earlier when I was chasing after Lasnina. However, I had actually thrown it in an arc with my mind control. Now that Lasnina had stopped, I commanded her to charge down from the clouds and suddenly explode in front of Lasnina. Lasnina was engulfed by a violent explosion that blew away the surrounding clouds. I wasn't an idiot who would explain my ability to her. While she was distracted, I would naturally hit her first. A fixed target was much easier to hit than a moving one. At this moment, just as Lasnina was wondering, is this holy light? Do you think I'll stop just because you say so? Where would I put my face then? Clang. Suddenly, the pain in my back reminded me that I wasn't the only one who knew how to play dirty tricks. This woman actually launched a sneak attack from behind. The chain sword of the snake's tail extended out from the clouds. Her demonic sword could actually be split up and could even attack automatically after being split up? Are you trying to distract me by talking, and then use the snake blades in the clouds to hurt me? Sinister as expected. It's useless. It's useless. However, this was still useless against me. I turned around and grabbed my demonic sword. Holy light flashed 3 times in a row, and all that was left was scrap metal without any spirituality. TSK, a turtle shell. You chose the wrong opponent. Lasnina walked out of the exploding clouds completely unscathed. It would seem that the previous exchange had only been an appetizer for both of us. From a certain standpoint, she had indeed chosen the wrong opponent. At the very least, it would seem that my special abilities countered hers. The most dangerous part about Sastia wasn't its ability to change and extend infinitely, nor was it the souls wailing on it. Rather, it was the blade itself. Sastia's blade seemed to have been corroded by blood, so it wasn't particularly sharp. However, it was actually covered in Devil's Curse art. The bloodstains were actually magical runes created by souls. In the hands of the Lord of Curses, Sastia's demonic sword was especially dangerous. Any physical body touched by Sastia's sword would instantly suffer from aging, soul-sucking, dullness, misfortune, and more than 20 other powerful curses. Even a god would be forcefully corrupted by Sastia's sword. Yet this was all meaningless to me. Roland, if you're a man, then take off your turtle shell. A beautiful woman's angry rebuke would always be quite powerful. However, I only wanted to laugh at Lasnina's words. Ha, your psychological methods are so bad that I'm wondering if you're a devil or not. You want me to take off my armor? Of course I can, but you should first throw down this sword. Then we can test if I'm a man or not. Alright then, what I got in response was a magic sword whip that suddenly increased in frequency. It would seem that Lasnina really didn't seem like a devil at all. She was able to explode with just a single sentence. However, such an attack was still completely ineffective. That's right, from the very start, I had the advantage because my full-body dragon-scale ice armor, Guardian of Yongya, had evolved to the semi-god equipment level. No matter how vicious a sword's blade was, it would only be fatal if it actually injured someone. I had used half of my abilities in exchange for defense, so it wouldn't be so easy to break through. As long as my armor was broken, I would be undefeatable. Not only that, this living armor also had the ability to repair itself. The longer this battle dragged on, the more obvious my advantage would become. Lasnina was indeed correct when she said that she chose the wrong opponent. She probably saw how thick Little Red's dragon scales were and how high her magic resistance was, which was why she chose me since I wasn't wearing any armor. She didn't expect that I would be able to summon this heavy defensive armor at any time. Meanwhile, Sailor the Berserker Demon of Slaughter was also facing a troublesome opponent. A famous veteran would indeed be quite amazing. However, while Sailor could use his fame to suppress others, there was also the risk of information about his abilities being leaked. I had summoned my armor the moment I saw Lasnina's magic sword. Meanwhile, Little Red was extremely experienced in dealing with Sailor's special ability. Sailor, the famous general of the Blood Wars, was just as famous as his physical characteristic. He was able to change the weight of an object just by touching it, making it heavier or lighter. He could even make sturdy armor as fragile as a piece of paper, or as sturdy as a city wall. Although nobody knew how he was able to do this type of power was definitely the nemesis of melee job classes. It would be even easier for him to deal with gigantic beasts. Nobody would be able to stop him in a chaotic battle. The moment that Little Red recognized her opponent, she unhesitatingly gave up on her stronger dragon form and transformed into her human form. She then began to show off her power as a fire and wind dual magic archmage. Soaring magic, short-range accurate instantaneous movement, dragon wings buff, flame spray, tornado transformation, rattlesnake agitation. The high-speed Little Red used her half-dragon form with dragon wings to show off what it meant to have high mobility and what it meant to be a natural fighter. Little Red's beautiful red figure kept appearing and disappearing in the sky. Every time the clumsy sailor chased after her, he would only see an afterimage. Then, he would be followed by a storm of flames and flames. Sailor had already fallen to the ground twice. If it wasn't for the fact that he was sturdy enough, he would have been smashed to smithereens already. Red dragons had a natural sense of space and aerial combat technique. Sailor still hadn't been able to touch his opponent. He had been getting beaten up the entire time. Yes, your special ability is quite powerful. You'll be able to kill me as long as you touch me. However, you should catch up to me first. Little Red was using her actions to provoke Sailor. Sailor had already met a highly mobile opponent before. He also had powerful short-range, instantaneous movement magic tools. However, he was hit by Little Red's dragon breath every time he tried to instantaneously teleport. He knew that he couldn't just casually teleport in front of this wind and fire archmage anymore. Little Red's draconic eyes locked onto all the dimensional cracks. Although Sailor was quite tanky, he was about to be cooked if this wind and fire archmage's flames continued to burn. Sailor tried to ask for help from the Lord of Curses, but discovered that the Lord of Curses was also in a stalemate. Now, the two Devil Lords regretted being so arrogant and caring about their reputation. Why didn't they just bring their entire devil army? I couldn't help but relax when I saw that Little Red still had the advantage. But just as I felt that we had a great advantage, Lasnina suddenly tossed aside her magic sword. I'm bored, mortal. I'll let you see my true power. Why I'm called the Lord of Curses. Chapter 578. Throw away my sword? Did she really want me to take off my armor and discuss whether or not I was a man? As long as you didn't want to take responsibility, I would welcome that. Cough, cough, things had been quite tense recently, so I should be more careful. Of course, Lasnina wouldn't have thrown away her magic sword for the sake of peace. Her magic sword suddenly broke apart in midair into several hundred metal shards that spun in the air. Sword immortal? Floating cannons? That's ridiculous. Although Lasnina was saying all sorts of things, she was actually on guard. Logically speaking, the attack power of the scattered shards should have decreased. Even if Lasnina's attack method became more difficult to defend against, it would still be meaningless if she couldn't break through Lasnina's defense. There wouldn't be any foundational difference. However, Lasnina was a famous Devil Lord. How could she possibly only have such a simple trick? The next instant, something inconceivable occurred. All the shards actually shot back at Lasnina's master. Lasnina's sword shards stabbed into her flesh, causing blood to fly everywhere. Lasnina was also stabbed into a bloody mess by her own magic sword. Countless blood-red runes instantly appeared on her physical body, just like the curse on her magic sword. Her physical body rapidly expanded, bringing with it an indescribable power. Curses are the evil intentions of the soul. Jealousy, hatred, anger, and guilt. Words are formless blades, and curses are bloody blades. all curses in the world are nothing but food for me. After completing her transformation, Lasnina was much larger than before. Her entire body was covered in blood and magical runes. Countless blades were stabbed into her flesh as if they were made of chains. Her right hand now carried a sword that was more than 3 meters long. If one only looked at her physical appearance, she was still humanoid. However, her magic power was completely incomparable to before. An incorporeal shadow appeared behind her. This was the abyss of evil that was currently devouring countless souls. This was the home of venomous worms at the bottom of the abyss. I had never seen such impure magic power before. It was rotten, smelly, slow, and countless negative curses mixed together. The entire sky was dyed in all sorts of colors. Waves of evil began to spread, dyeing the suddenly falling rain black. Every drop of rain was filled with evil, sinful intent. It was as if ghosts were wailing inside. Endless evil and filth polluted the entire world, just like a stinky virus. Just looking at it would make me feel like I was being devoured. Arg! Ouch, ouch! When the lizard men below saw this scene, they couldn't take it anymore. Some of them knelt down and vomited, some of them wailed, and some of them instinctively tried to run away. However, there was no difference between the lizard men and the lizard men. As they ran, they turned into skeletons. Those who vomited their internal organs, and those who cried eventually ran dry of blood and tears. Those who reacted quickly blinded themselves and saved their lives for a short period of time. However, the demonic sound entered their ears and the stench entered their nostrils. The best outcome was that they would be crippled for life. The lizardman witch doctor, who had just used up his divine power, knelt on the ground and vomited. Apart from his bloody organs, he also vomited out black and grayish-white human-faced worms. That was the truth of the indescribable cursed object. Curses were the foundational malice of the soul. As the strongest source of malice in the world, Lasnina was able to indiscriminately curse all life and pollute the entire world simply by revealing her true form. Is this the true form of the King of Curses? This is really ugly. Lasnina was the one who said this. She was now completely covered in blood. Yes, this appearance is so ugly. That's why everyone who's seen her before, there was no need for me to say anything else. Since she had already revealed her true form, she naturally wouldn't stop until she was dead. They all signed a confidentiality agreement with you? Actually, I know a few good plastic surgery hospitals. I casually made a lame joke, but I was actually smiling wryly in my heart. Just looking at the size of her magic power, she was at least 3 times stronger than before. Previously, she was only 1 level higher than me. Now, she was at the level of being able to completely crush me. I kept having an ominous feeling. Since Lasnina had revealed her true form that even she believed to be incredibly ugly, I naturally had to take her down at all costs. As expected of that person's older brother. You're just as skilled at making people angry as him. The Devil Lord who had undergone such a huge transformation felt uncomfortable every second. She had no intentions of chatting. The next instant, her figure flashed as she attacked. Lasnina's shadow disappeared in the blink of an eye. I could only sense that she was constantly approaching. Even my soul vision couldn't lock onto her in time. So fast. Before I could even react, Lasnina's sword viciously slashed at my face. Even now, there were no spatial ripples at all. This wasn't teleportation. This was pure physical strength. Lasnina's sword furiously slashed at my body repeatedly. Direct attacks, side attacks, whipping attacks, piercing attacks, sweeping attacks, heavy attacks from the front, hammering attacks from the back of my head, piercing my eyes, piercing my ears, and hitting my groin. Every part of my body was being attacked. It was as if 8 giant snakes were furiously tearing at my physical body. Ahaha! Let's see just how long your turtle shell can last. Lasnina was trying to forcefully break through the turtle shell, as well as test out the weaknesses of this armor. If this was an ordinary man-made armor, it would definitely have weak points such as connections or air vents. However, Lasnina's attempts were destined to be fruitless. The Guardian of the Night was a defensive armor created from the power of her bloodline. Every part of the armor was created simultaneously. How could it possibly have any obvious weaknesses? Holy light! I had just opened my mouth to say something when Lasnina's sword almost stabbed into my mouth. Lasnina's high-speed attacks were like an endless ocean, coming wave after wave. I had no chance to counterattack at all. And so I decided to close my eyes. Have you given up? Come on, counterattack, you coward! Lasnina's hysterical screams echoed in my ears as she suddenly punched me in the stomach. The penetrative power caused me to spit out blood. But even so, I still grit my teeth and closed my eyes. 1 attack, 2 attacks, 100 attacks, 1,000 attacks. Finally, my dragon armor began to crack. This meant that my regenerative abilities were no longer able to keep up with my destructive power. My dragon armor could completely collapse at any moment. Coward, just hide like a turtle and die. The berserk Lasnina was no longer able to control her emotions. She had tossed aside her original plans. Right now, her only thought was to tear apart this bastard before her. But at this moment, I opened my eyes. One eye was black, while the other eye was white. The other eye was black, while the other eye was white. It was as if they were two halves of the Tai Chi symbol. Judgment, my words were cold and emotionless, as if I were a high and mighty god's judgment on the mortal world. It had nothing to do with me or the world. Lasnina was guilty, so I was judging her. The stare of the Hell God had been forced to its limits. I had to use this incredibly dangerous ace up my sleeve. Lasnina paused when I stared at her, just like a frog being stared at by a snake. Then, the next instant, her entire body started bleeding profusely. It was as if she had just received the punishment of endless purgatory in that 1 second. Nobody knew what Lasnina had seen in that instant. The normally fearless Lord of Curses was now terrified. Her face was completely pale, and all the magical runes on her body had lost their luster. Her sweat and blood mixed together, and she didn't even have the time to stop her blood from spraying out. It was no wonder that she felt so uncomfortable. After the stare of the Hell God was created, the stare of the Hell God had improved by leaps and bounds. The stare of the Hell God was a judgment that originated from the soul. Every life had two sides. If there was good, then there would be evil. Even the most heartless individual would have a shred of conscience in their hearts. And the stare of the Hell God was a natural talent that allowed one to separate good from evil. Their conscience would transform into a judge that would judge the sins of an evil soul and punish them accordingly. It would be impossible for anyone to lie to themselves. It would be impossible to dodge an attack from oneself. The more sins one had committed in the past, the more sins one had committed in the past. The karmic attacks would be unavoidable, and there was no way to avoid them. Perhaps only an instant had passed in our eyes. But, in Lasnina's senses, perhaps thousands of years had passed in purgatory. Sailor, let's go. The next instant, Sailor unhesitatingly ran away in panic. Sailor, who was at a disadvantage, also unhesitatingly retreated after seeing that even his master had been defeated. Extreme fatigue swept over me. I really wanted to sleep right away. Unfortunately, the gigantic existence above me hadn't attacked yet. I still needed to be on guard against it. Snake God Voka, you're not fighting and you're not retreating. Why are you doing this? Chapter 579. The cloth wrapped around his eyes, but the blood continued to seep down. His senses were completely sealed, but there was a world of black and white. Black was death, white was life, black was evil, white was good. However, I could sense that these were just colors that had been casually smeared by a brush. The borders were blurry, and the colors were faintly fading away. It was as if I could easily change it with a single swipe of my hand, changing life and death, reversing good and evil, and then then you'll die. You'll die because you asked for it. The silly cat's retorts were still as exasperating as ever. Still, she wasn't wrong. If I really changed the definition of life and death as I pleased, that would be no different from forcefully taking over the creator-goddess authority. I would likely self-destruct on the spot the very next second. The stare of the Hell God was far too dangerous, no matter if it was to my opponents or to myself. This wasn't an ability that mortals should be able to control. At the very least, before becoming a semi-god, using it every time would be equivalent to going berserk. Using it so casually would be equivalent to suicide. And the first time this trump card appeared, the opponent was already not simple. The Devil Lords stood at the apex of all devils. Every single one of them was incredibly difficult to deal with. They were famed experts in all dimensions, and ordinary human semi-gods would be completely helpless before them. Even though I had the advantage of suppressing his abilities, I wouldn't be able to fight him head-on before I completed my first myth-ranked weapon. That was why I could only use this trump card that I hadn't fully mastered yet. With such a powerful opponent as his target, the Nether God's eyes were overloaded and out of control from the very beginning. If the battle had continued for a while longer, his eyeballs would probably have exploded. Any type of supernatural interference would depend on the user's basic energy level. The absolute difference in magic power meant that it would be impossible for me to kill Lasnina just by relying on my species' natural talent. It would be impossible for an ox cart to pull a train. In the end, the ox cart would overload and become useless. Fortunately, Lasnina had been scared off like a bird startled by the mere twang of a bowstring. Once she calmed down, she would probably be even more difficult to deal with. But now, the inhuman pain in my eyes reminded me of the price of victory. Not only would I be unable to use my Stare of the Hell God until I completely recovered, but I would also have to experience living as a blind person. The surroundings were eerily silent. I couldn't move around as I pleased, so I was bored. Suddenly, I had a thought that I had been accumulating for a long time. Perhaps this was my chance. He covered his eyes and bared his upper body. He stretched out his wings and lowered his head to reveal an ice crystal skeleton. He hugged the skeleton with one hand and stroked a small yellow flower with the other. Then, he turned his head around. I've been imprisoned for 10,000 years and expelled from my hometown. Now you actually dare to trespass into my territory. You're courting death. Yes, since he was blind, he naturally had to take the opportunity to cosplay as Brother Egg. He seems to be even more unfortunate than you. The system's retort made me feel helpless. Was it really that easy to guess? In the next instant, a mask with 8 eyes appeared on his face. He was blind, who wielded a sword with both hands. Your sword is my sword, and my sword is still my sword. That's a typo, right? Also, that guy isn't blind. This level of difficulty was far too low. I thought for a moment before putting on a cloak and a transparent ice mirror, revealing an appearance of contemplating life. If it's for eternal justice, I'm willing to bear all the infamy and eternal crimes. That's a villain, right? If you're cosplaying Grim Reaper, you should at least wear a captain's coat, right? And so, I wrote the word, Mind's Eye, on a piece of cloth as I held a shield in one hand and a spear in the other. Still a villain, still an unpopular joke that reveals his age. All right then, the next instant, I put on a red archmage robe and held a magic staff as I revealed a sunny smile. Even more revealing of his age, but he's still a villain, and at the level of a final boss. Are there no good people among blind people? I did my best to think and came up with a blind ninja A, a blind ninja B, a blind samurai a half-blind samurai B, a samurai pretending to be blind E. Finally, I thought of a righteous blind person from an old anime that revealed his age, and immediately started taking off his clothes. Why are you taking off your clothes? Are you an exhibitionist? TSK, if he doesn't take off his clothes, How is he going to cosplay as that cockroach whose clothes will be ripped off the moment the fight starts? By the way, isn't he always ripping off his clothes to show off the master-level tattoo on his back? After thinking about it for a while, I came up with a rather useless rule. If a blind person appeared in an anime, the majority of them would be male villains. The number of blind people who appeared as the main character could be counted on one hand, and most of them would be sword-wielding samurai. Why would a blind person choose a melee job class? Weren't they afraid that they wouldn't be able to see the blade of a sword and cut themselves? Since I have such a rare opportunity, perhaps I should change my appearance as well. I think there's a one-eyed blind samurai who looks really cool. Why don't I try? But, by the way, Harlois, forget about holding a sword in each hand. Isn't he afraid that his mouth will be covered in blood if he has another sword in his mouth? Right? How is he able to speak while biting a sword in his mouth without leaking air? Don't ask me, you're so stupid. If you dare to make such an appearance, don't blame me for pretending that I don't know you. The silly cat yawned lazily. After such a difficult battle, she was rather fatigued. During the battle, I had extracted a large amount of mana from her in order to regenerate my armor. She had basically become my mana pool. Fortunately, I had 2 times the mana pool at the beginning of Myth rank. Otherwise, my dragon armor would have been shattered long ago. And even if my defense hadn't been broken, I was still in pain all over, with wounds all over my body. Even with my armor, my magic sword's attacks aren't that easy to deal with. I was making fun of Harlois out of boredom, but I was actually finding joy in her pain. The holy light was currently healing her own wounds. And this place that we were currently in wasn't a safe place at all. This was a holy temple filled with white-robed snake-headed servants. The murals and sculptures on the walls all had the same theme, praising the venerated snake god Voka. Only after we defeated the devil's ambush did we have the energy to deal with snake god Voka, who had been watching us all this time. Actually, I was already quite glad that he hadn't done anything yet, or, more accurately speaking, I found it inconceivable. But what was even more astonishing was that not only did he not show any hostility, he even invited us to his temple as guests. He even offered to provide us with assistance and teleportation portals. Chaos and the Chaos Abyss shared the same rule. It would already be a great favor if the Chaos Abyss didn't take advantage of your predicament. I was rather unable to see through Snake God Voka's intentions. From start to finish, he hadn't shown any hostility at all. In fact, now that I thought about it, it was his appearance that reminded us that we were being targeted. Although it sounded ridiculous, Voka had indeed used his actions to show the Chaos Abyss the rare and precious kindness. In that case, it was only natural that I would listen to what he wanted to say. Alright then, to be honest, since Voka had invited us, considering the difference in power levels between us, yep, the worst-case scenario would be that we would simply run away, so there was no foundational difference. So we gladly accepted his invitation. Since Voka had moved us to his temple, he was also kind enough to give us time and space to take care of the injured. That was why we had the free time to do all this. Meanwhile, Little Red had already begun eating and drinking to her heart's content. The leftover meat and bones had piled up into a small mountain. The snake-person servant who had been serving her food was already half-dead tired. For dragons, it wouldn't be a problem for them to replenish their energy as long as they had enough food and sleep. Although Little Red had always had the advantage in battle, she had actually used up a lot of energy when fighting against the Blood War general. Not only did she have to use a fighting style that she wasn't skilled at, she also had to constantly be on high alert. She had been kiting quite elegantly, but she didn't have the killing power to end the battle. She was constantly on high alert, and if Sailor managed to get close to her just once, there wouldn't be a second time. It would probably be quite tiring and frustrating for her to use a fighting style that she wasn't skilled at for an extended period of time. The foundational difference between Little Red and other dragons was that she didn't have the so-called dignity of dragons. She was quite skilled at learning other species' specialties and advantages. If it were any other dragon, they wouldn't have learned all those random tricks. Instead, they would have used the powerful physical bodies that dragons were most proficient in to fight against Sailor. Everyone knew that fighting against Sailor, who was capable of controlling the quality of matter, would be no different from suicide. Alcohol, alcohol, alcohol. Just meat alone won't be enough. I need to replenish my mana. So alcohol could replenish mana as well? This was the first time I'd heard about this. What a joke. An Archmage's #1 priority was to ban alcohol. Alcohol would make one's head hot, which would be the equivalent of making one's mana go out of control. I shook my head. Since Little Red was interested in alcohol, there was no point in saying anything else. If I got too close to her, I would be forced to drink alcohol. It would be terrible if a banquet really happened. As an injured person, I would need to ban alcohol for a while. The light of salvation, which healed and dispelled everything on my body, kept circling around me. I felt a cooling sensation coming from all the thousands of wounds on my body. However, it would still take some time to dispel the curse that had seeped into my flesh and blood. The foundational difference in mana made me, the victor, have to taste the pain of the loser. I'm sorry, there's no alcohol in this palace. Our king is— I paused mid-sentence in surprise as a handsome white-robed youth walked into the palace. His black hair reached all the way to his waist. Judging from his mana, he was definitely Snake God Voka. Even though Snake God Voka was still in his half-snake form when facing off against the Devil Lord, he chose to transform into his human form when meeting with us. This was a sign of goodwill towards us, as well as a sign of how much importance he placed on what he was about to discuss with us. A single statement or small action could represent many things. Many thoughts flashed through my mind, but I rejected all of them. Finally, an inconceivable possibility appeared on the table. Although it sounds ridiculous, this is the only possibility after all the impossibilities are eliminated. In that case, he really did find the right person to talk to me. I couldn't help but reveal a brilliant smile as I thought about how Voka had a favor to ask of me. If it really was as I thought, perhaps I would be able to make a good deal out of him, and have a friendly chat. Chapter 580. Any kindness has a reason and a price. Although this sounded like I was measuring the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain, in a damned place like the Chaos Abyss, kindness without a reason was far more unsettling than malice. The devil's departure was only temporary. Lasnina had only been mentally injured. Once she recovered, she would come back sooner or later. Considering how she had suffered this time, I would definitely bring 1 or 2 more devil lords or even the entire devil army with me next time. I think that our top priority right now is to hurry up and escape. Why does His Highness Voka want to see us? I refuse to believe that she would be able to find us as long as our destination wasn't exposed. Why don't you have more fun? I can arrange a tour guide for you. Have more fun in the Chaos Abyss? If it wasn't for the fact that Snake God Voka was the one saying this, and that we weren't currently in his divine kingdom, I would have flipped the table already. Could you at least speak like a human? Was this really a place where it was possible to organize a tour route? I could understand that he hadn't spoken like a human for far too long, so he was trying to find something to say. However, could he consider reality? Traveling in the Chaos Abyss, which was filled with mud and swamps. Perhaps it really would work. As long as we filmed a show about survival in the wild, we would have to prevent any prey from devouring the entire filming crew. Snake God Voka would also have to protect us. There's no point in being polite to begin with, so I'll just get straight to the point. While my mind was already racing, and I was really starting to plan out how to profit from this tour route, Voka was the first to stop talking about it. I hope that you can help me establish a connection with the gods of Hades. As I expected, In an instant, I revealed a troubled expression. Of course, it wasn't really awkward. Establishing a connection with the gods of Hades wouldn't be difficult at all for me. But if things were too easy, how could I use this opportunity to extort and show how important I was? Abyss snake god Voka wanted to join the Hades faction? This seemed inconceivable, but it was actually quite understandable. Over the past few years, many gods had joined the Chaos Abyss. What was even more inconceivable was that most of these gods were chaos evil gods. But if one thought about it carefully, it was only natural. When there were only two factions in the world, every single person or country would have to choose a side. Not only would they have to express their loyalty, they would also have to express their hatred towards the opposing faction. Otherwise, they would be considered an anomaly that couldn't be tolerated by either faction, and they would. Alright, we all know the result. When there was a victor between the two camps and there was only one camp left, the victor would divide and seize the spoils of war. There was nothing much to say. Just take a look at the hundreds of wars that a certain country on Earth had created after the Cold War, and you would know. When totalitarianism lost its restraints, when all ambitions could be realized at will, when the treasuries of other countries were no longer guarded, when one person was both a player and a referee, there was no need to say what would happen. But when there were only three major factions in the world, many situations would be foundationally different. A triangular structure might seem incredibly unstable, but it was actually incredibly flexible. Any angle could support the triangular structure. Minor changes in power and slight adjustments in the angle wouldn't cause the entire structure to collapse. Many of the previous Chaos Evil gods had once been members of the Order gods. But when they left their divine positions for various reasons, they discovered that even though the world was large, they had nowhere else to go. In the end, they could only choose to take root in the Chaos Abyss and become a member of the Chaos Abyss. This was the disadvantage of having two factions. It was either you or me, black or white. There was no room for ambiguous choices. But now, the Chaos Evil gods that joined the Hades faction weren't truly members of the Hades faction. They were instead members of a third party. Their goal was only to break free from the Order and Chaos Abyss control over them. The Hades faction was more than happy to provide this type of protection. This was one of the goals that the Hades faction pursued. Most of the new third-party members were Chaos Evil gods. It wasn't that the low and middle order gods were doing quite well. It was that they were being controlled even more deeply. Sincerity. These were simple words, but they were quite thought-provoking. I was personally asking for an intermediary fee, as well as the Hades faction asking Voka to express his sincerity and determination to break free from the Chaos Abyss. There had to be a reason for your betrayal, right? Why didn't the Chaos faction treat you well? Shouldn't you at least tell me? Voka revealed a bitter smile when he heard this. Light flashed through his green eyes, and he seemed to be filled with an indescribable sorrow. The current generation probably only knows that I, Voka, am the snake god and the god of poison. What they don't know is that I was originally a gigantic white snake at the foot of Hainer Mountain, the local guardian god of the forest. I used to be the nature totem god, as well as a member of the nature faction. Not to mention, even I didn't know that the nature faction was once the number one god faction that leaned towards the order faction. The nature faction's main god was the famous Earth Mother Goddess. Voka told me about how he had been betrayed during the Holy War, and how he had fallen from being the guardian god of forests and snake men to becoming the god of poison. Even the snake men under his protection had been stripped of their reason and conscience, and were now known as snake demons. This wasn't anything new. In the end, it was nothing more than a holy war where a powerful species was reduced to a third-rate species. Even their guardian gods were exiled. In the end, they could only become level lords of the Chaos Abyss. I didn't say a single word as I listened to Voka's story with great interest, as if I was listening to a story. Actually, I was indeed treating this as a story. No matter how moving or complicated the story was, most of the people involved were already dead. What else could I do apart from treat this story as entertainment? Also, Voka's story was obviously far too biased. He even said, "It wasn't my fault" throughout the entire story. He made himself sound like the #1 tragic male lead in the world, which made his story even more doubtful. The entire story was about how Voka had been misunderstood and exiled by the Nature faction. He was then forced to settle down in the Chaos Abyss. Now that he was sick of this place, he wanted to move to another place to live. At any rate, everyone else was in the wrong. There was no need for me to argue about this. The truth of this story wasn't that important. The Hades faction and I needed a reason, and Voka gave me a reason. That was enough. As for whether or not this reason was real, actually, both sides knew that the past wasn't important at all. What was important was what Voka would do in the future. And saying anything about this would be meaningless. Time would prove everything. Practical actions and exchanges of benefits would help establish a new alliance. Of course, if I spoke on behalf of Voka, the main gods of the Hades faction would pay more attention to this alliance. This alliance would be established much faster, but that was all. Voka was quite generous. He accidentally told me that I lacked myth-ranked materials. He opened up his treasury and allowed me to choose 2 items of my choosing as payment for acting as the middleman. And I accidentally asked him about the devils. Even though we clearly didn't have any grudges against each other, why were they suddenly trying to kill us? About that? I think they intend to use you as a hostage in exchange for Ilmigia from Cavendish. What's the matter with you? All right, at that moment, my face was probably twisted. Haha, a good older brother is one who occasionally takes the blame for his younger brother. The silly cat wasn't even sleeping anymore. She was rolling around on the ground in laughter. I picked her up and casually tossed her into a nearby pool of water. My negotiation with Voka ended here. He definitely had his own expectations for being willing to give up all his wealth in the Chaos Abyss. Perhaps he wanted the snake demons to be able to live in the mortal plane, or perhaps he wanted to reclaim his divine concept of forest guardian. But none of this was something he should be discussing with me. I was happy to pretend that I didn't know anything. As for Voka's treasury, I didn't have much expectations for it. Most of the ancient gods here probably had god equipment in their possession, but they definitely wouldn't be willing to give it to me. Would he really give up all his treasures just because he said so? There would be a limit to how naive I could be. At most, it would only be an ordinary mortal's treasury. If I specifically asked for something, it would be difficult for Voka to refuse. But since he was aimless, it would actually be easier to fool him. After all, I didn't know what treasures he had. He would definitely have poison-related treasures, and he would definitely have plenty of treasures related to snake men. But what use would I have? This was fine as well. But, just as Voka and I were about to start a banquet, he suddenly furrowed his eyebrows. "Your Highness Roland, perhaps you should speed up your journey. Just now, 2 more devil lords entered this mortal plane." Chapter 581. Are devil lords so worthless these days? There was no need to doubt snake god Voka's information. He was the master of this dimension with countless spies serving him. He also had countless connections to the dimensional laws of this dimension. It would be very difficult for anything to escape his notice. However, there were only 5 devil lords in total. With so many devil lords attacking me, it was likely that they wouldn't even be able to defend their own territory. Now, 3 more devil lords were chasing after me. The situation would definitely become even worse. It was likely that they would lose several levels in a row. Should I feel honored that they paid such a high price just to capture me? We can't stay here any longer. This was the common understanding that didn't need to be said. If we waited here, we wouldn't have much time left. If the devils really came here, things would become even more interesting. Since time was limited, I didn't bother acting. I directly asked Voka to help me. At the very least, he would arrange a safe path for me. At the same time, I would fulfill my promise. Voka definitely had a dimensional teleportation portal here. In that case, there was no need for me to return to the limestone dwarf tribe. Now obviously wasn't the time to waste time. Although it was a pity that I wouldn't be able to receive payment from the dwarves, it wouldn't be too much of a loss with Voka's compensation. Voka also directly expressed his goodwill. He asked a divine servant to arrange a teleportation portal for us while having someone take us to his treasury to receive our payment. Even so, I still didn't tell him our true destination. I only told him that we were going to the 102nd level of the Chaos Abyss. Didn't we have a good negotiation? Why don't you trust him? Little Red asked as she rubbed her stomach and picked her teeth as we walked through an exquisite corridor filled with white clouds. She looked at all the snake god's achievements carved into the white jade walls around us. This isn't a question of whether or not I trust him. It's only natural for me to be cautious. Our value isn't much higher than the devil's, and Voka isn't that loyal. Do you really think that the Devil Lord would need to lie to the devils and offend them for our sake? He'll definitely do us a favor and sell us out. After all, there's no way we'll come back to the Chaos Abyss to take revenge on him for such a small matter? The 102nd level that I was currently talking about matched up with the dwarves' information. Although there were only 2 levels of difference, there were actually 2 levels of difference. That meant that there were 2 different worlds. It would take quite a bit of effort to find the 102nd level. Oh, Little Red didn't take it to heart. She was just asking casually, then turned her attention to the snake man who was leading the way. I felt helpless. She had just casually asked me a question, and I had to explain so much seriously. I felt a little silly. It was the same in the past. She and Adam didn't care about anything other than the fun of the adventure itself. They didn't care about the messy schemes involved. This wasn't a big deal. It was enough for the leader to put in more effort. However, these two were extremely good at stirring up trouble. After stirring up trouble, they would act recklessly. Marguerite and I would always have to clean up the mess for them. Not only did he not die after repeatedly causing trouble, he even met benefactors in his fortuitous encounters and obtained training, becoming stronger and stronger. Could this be the legendary main character's fate? Wherever he went, there would always be a disaster. But from the perspective of the people involved, no matter how one looked at it, they seemed like a lucky brat. Could it be that those so-called heroes who were born with historical missions were also a group of extremely lucky brats? Yep, only by stirring up trouble would one grow faster. Those who were unlucky or didn't grow stronger quickly enough would all die. Those who were lucky and talented would become the main character. My mind wandered as I followed the snake man leading the way. We strolled through the corridors and stairs leading to the next palace. Since there was still enough time, I didn't act rashly. The scenery along the way was quite nice. The palaces seemed simple due to their natural geomancy. However, their designs were unique, beautiful, and elegant. They were classical yet not overly extravagant. They would be worth visiting even as a tourist attraction. The palaces were built along a mountain. A long river ran through the entire divine kingdom. The god servants and god envoys lived along the river. A large, dense forest took up 70% of the divine kingdom's surface area. It was so obvious that Voka favored the forest. I was starting to believe that Voka had once been the guardian god of the forest. Standing on the stairs, I could see the mountains and plains. Not far away was a giant waterfall that cascaded down from a cliff that was thousands of meters tall. The sound of the water sounded like thunder when I got closer. After turning a corner, I saw that the waterfall really was right in front of me. It was a barrier that descended from the sky that blocked the stairs. I frowned. The waterfall had blocked the path. There was no path to the stairs? Let's see what that meant. Your Highness Roland, please come this way. This is the most majestic scenery in our divine kingdom. When I got closer, I discovered that there was actually a cave that was several dozen meters wide and 5 or 6 meters tall in between the waterfall. This was the entrance to the next path. Being able to create a path through a 1,000-ton waterfall was truly amazing. However, from a god's perspective, this wouldn't even be considered a so-called desperate situation. The snake man was about to enter the cave, but I stopped. What type of gigantic beast skeleton is this? It was impossible for me to completely trust Voka. Ever since I entered this divine kingdom, Harlois' incarnation had been responsible for keeping watch and being on guard. Just now, Harlois shared with me a view of the scenery from the sky. The incarnation of a bird was thousands of meters high in the sky. When looking down from above, a human would seem as tiny as a grain of rice. However, a gigantic dragon skeleton was abnormally eye-catching. The dragon skeleton was constantly being battered by the waterfall. This gigantic white skeleton was as white as jade, and its gigantic body blocked the unstoppable waterfall without moving at all. 100 meters? 1,000 meters? That's comparable to the tiger god. In most situations, the size of a dragon's was directly proportional to their power level. Although a small dragon might not necessarily be smaller than a large dragon, it was already unimaginable for a dragon skeleton to be this large. It was obvious that this was the skeleton of a super-powerful supreme immemorial dragon that far surpassed any ordinary supreme immemorial dragon. I could imagine just how powerful this dragon skeleton must have been when it was alive. It was likely that even the supreme immemorial dragons in Dragon World would be nothing in front of it. I was rather tempted. If I could use such a gigantic dragon skeleton as material, I could create an incredibly powerful super bone dragon. However, after thinking about it, I gave up on this idea. This dragon skeleton was far too ancient, and it had been slowly purified by a god's divine power in my divine kingdom. There wasn't much negative energy left in it. If that was all, it would still be possible to save it. However, it just so happened that it was being washed by the waterfall, and the water itself had a certain amount of purifying properties. At this point, I was no longer interested in the dragon skeleton's resentment. It would be far too difficult to revive it. When considering how I would fight in the future, it didn't seem very meaningful to pursue a gigantic war machine. In the end, I gave up on asking Voka for the dragon skeleton. Suddenly, Little Red, who had been absent-minded all this time, stopped what she was doing. She seemed to be interested in watching the rainbow created by the waterfall's splashes. However, I heard her hurried words. "Roland, don't hesitate to obtain this dragon skeleton at all costs. This is the skeleton of the owner of that dragon heart. If I obtain it, it should be no problem for me to progress in power level." I paused in surprise for a moment when I heard this, but then I was overjoyed. Humans weren't the only ones in this world who could improve themselves through training. The Dark Elves' shadow dancers, the Wood Elves' natural archers, and the Beastmen's berserkers were all famous for having powerful unique job classes. So-called job classes and power level advancement were all cultivation paths left behind by previous generations. It was quite normal for a species to have a job class that was suitable for their species' natural talent. Even the ogres were capable of producing ogre mages and shamans. How could dragons, the strongest species of all, not have any job classes? Indeed, dragons could become stronger as time passed. However, there were also many powerful individuals who actively pursued power and opened up their own path. Primordial dragon gods, supreme immemorial dragons, and so on. However, dragons were different from ordinary human job classes. To begin with, dragons' combat was based on their physical bodies. Their power level advancement was more like a physical evolution, a foundational change in their bodies. Dragon skin carving was a type of battle dragon who wore magic rune armor all over their bodies. They were similar to the human warrior monks, but they were famous across the universe for their superior defensive abilities. Their magic runes on their skin could even provide powerful magic support. Blood berserk dragons were the berserkers of the dragon race. They abandoned their useless wings and evolved to have even stronger fangs and claws. They pursued the strongest melee combat ability, and they had the ability to go berserk, which was definitely more terrifying than the beastmen. Guardian dragons were eternal dragons who abandoned their wealth and useless vanity in order to obtain eternal life. They were magnificent and mighty, but they rarely fought. Their abilities were a secret, but every single one of them was a famous major individual in Dragon City. These three types of dragons were all quite common in power level advancement. Actually, Little Red's mother had transformed into an inferno dragon. This could also be considered a type of power level advancement. An inferno red dragon would obtain the ability to demonize. The dragon flames that they spat out would become corrosive, and they would even be able to summon cannon fodder from the lower planes. However, after transforming into an inferno dragon, Molly's abilities were greatly reduced. She lost her outstanding fire control, fire resistance, and combat abilities as a red dragon. Molly was beaten up even worse by Little Red. Many dragons discovered that they were unable to improve in power level anytime soon, so they would stack their racial talents on top of each other's job class. This would give them an effect of 1 + 1 = more than 3. Actually, humans had similar power level advancements as well. For example, demon warlocks and dragon bloodline warlocks would add the characteristics of demons and dragons to their physical bodies. In theory, this was the same as the power level advancement of dragons. However, the effects would be vastly different. Compared to human power level advancements, dragons' power level advancement represented a change in their very essence and evolution. They would have to pay more and change even more. It could be said that a dragon would be a completely different species from the previous dragon species after power level advancement. In fact, there would even be the ridiculous issue of reproductive isolation. Little Red had previously learned magic from a human archmage. This actually didn't count as a power level advancement. However, as far as I knew, she had long since met the requirements for power level advancement. She also had several powerful power level advancement materials and preparations. It was just that she wasn't interested in ordinary power level advancements. Rather than having her power level advancement too early and having her future development limited, it would be far better to simply sharpen her foundation and create her own path. I also agreed with Little Red's choice. She could also improve herself by cultivating wind and fire magic. There was no need for her to randomly choose a power level advancement to limit herself. It was obvious that no matter if she became a carving skin dragon, a blood berserk dragon, or a guardian dragon, she would gain as much as she would lose. At the very least, it would be unavoidable that her natural talent for fire control would greatly decrease. It was even possible that she would become weaker. At any rate, dragons are already strong enough without power level advancement. They can cultivate their own element magic for the rest of their lives. There's no need for them to forcefully power level advancement. Yet, Little Red was saying that she had already found a way to power level advancement. This doubtlessly meant that she had already discovered the dragon god's path through dragon blood and dragon bones, and was greatly tempted by it. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Only the Chaos Abyss will have such an opportunity. This was the Chaos Abyss. Although it was incredibly dangerous, it was also filled with opportunities. Far too many powerful individuals had come here with their dreams in pursuit of opportunities. However, as they died here, their dreams became opportunities for others. Fallen gods, lost god equipment, and the remains of a certain myth-ranked individual. Compared to the mortal plane's peace and tranquility, the endless chaos abyss also represented immeasurable opportunities and hope. Perhaps one could suddenly rise up or fall forever with a single thought. Little Red's standards were extraordinarily high. Her foundational power level was also terrifyingly high. Even without power level advancement, Little Red was able to beat up Molly, who had already broken through twice, into a sorry state and had to run away. Any power level advancement that Little Red was interested in would definitely be something she liked. I had been working on my own power level advancement, yet I had mysteriously helped Little Red with her power level advancement. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But since such an excellent opportunity had appeared before me, how could I possibly miss it? Originally, Little Red had improved the least over the past few years. This wasn't because she hadn't been working hard. The reason was quite simple and convincing. Her starting point was far too high, while the dragons improved far too slowly. It was only natural that they would grow slower. Most of Little Red's improvements weren't due to foundational changes in power level, but rather due to changes in fighting style. Now that there was such an excellent opportunity to improve her foundational power level, as a true brother or perhaps a true sister, I would naturally fight for this opportunity to the very end. What if he doesn't give it to you? Then steal it. Do you still remember the dwarves' dimensional doors coordinates? Let's meet up there. Little Red nodded in satisfaction as she went back to enjoying the scenery. As for negotiating with him, that would naturally be up to me. Actually, I can introduce you to a dwarven construction team. They can help you build a safe and beautiful dimensional door, and so, I began my journey of bargaining with Voka. Then, as I chatted, I went to look for Voka again. Chapter 582. Sun, raise up the dust of the desert. You seem to be able to have fun wherever you go. TSK, the Chaos Abyss is such a damned place. I'm happy being poor. Although I said the appropriate lines, the scene before me really made me happy being poor. This was already the second week since I left the Snake God's mortal plane. However, I missed that damp and dark swamp. This was the complete opposite of the Death Swamp. This was a golden desert. The sky was blue and the ground was golden. Every time I stepped on the sand, it would sink. No matter where I went, everything would be the same color. It was as if there was nothing here apart from white clouds and endless yellow sand. I wanted to ask Voka for that dragon bone, but he was quite free and easy. He didn't even ask why we wanted it and directly gave it to us. I didn't need to carry out my original plan to steal it. I didn't need to offend the Snake God, so I now had another enemy who wanted to kill me. I heaved a sigh of relief. Little Red, however, was quite regretful. It would seem that she had been cooped up for far too long. Now that she didn't have to act like a dignified elder, she directly degenerated into a naughty child. But when I thought about it, it was only natural that Voka didn't care about dragon bones. He didn't have that dragon's heart as a key, nor did he have any intentions of learning undead magic. These dragon bones were probably nothing more than decorations to him. And if his negotiations with the Hades gods went well, it was likely that he would have to move away. In that case, rather than tossing these clumsy and useless items away, he might as well give them to us as a favor. System, how much longer will she need? Won't she fail? Considering her accumulation, the probability of her failing is less than 1%. I became even more nervous when I heard this. Even the silly cat couldn't bear to watch anymore. Mises isn't a jinx like you. A 1% failure rate is a 100% failure rate. Stop being so nervous. If you get involved, you might drag down her luck stat. That would truly be a tragedy. Actually, I couldn't be blamed for being overly nervous. Dragon's power levels were all quite strange to begin with. I had heard of even the most ridiculous ones, but I had never seen anything as strange as Little Red's. It was said that the carving skin dragon had to carve magic runes on all the skin on its body. It was said that the most perfect ritual was to take the skin of a powerful prey and sew it on its own body. Not to mention that it was a huge project, just thinking about it was painful. It was no wonder that they were super resistant to beatings. It was possible that their pain nerves had been damaged during the ritual. The blood berserk dragons wanted to give up on their wings, and in that case, they would have to chop them off. I heard that their wings were the most sensitive parts of their bodies, comparable to certain vital parts of a human's body. Don't worry about how I knew about the most sensitive parts of dragons. At any rate, I didn't really understand this ritual. It was said that the dragons who went through this ritual would greatly increase their speed, and they would come and go like the wind. Their claws and teeth would become as sharp as swords, and they would be able to create a hole with every stab. Could this be the dragon's version of the Sunflower Manual? If these two conditions were still within the realm of understanding, then the requirement for the Dragon of Conservation to advance to the next rank was to devour all of his treasures and swear to give up all of his personal property. This was even more incomprehensible. Even if you wanted to abandon your personal property, you shouldn't do it this way. You just have to abandon your personal property. Isn't it enough for you to swallow all of your treasures? Aren't you afraid of gastric prolapse and indigestion? Even if you don't want them, you can just give them to me. Perhaps Little Red's advancement ritual wouldn't be too ridiculous because of these strange precedents. Right now, I had an additional backpack in my luggage. Inside the backpack was a dark green dragon egg with red spots. After Little Red confirmed her advancement, she actually returned to her dragon egg. It was evident that Little Red was currently incredibly weak. This was probably the weakest she had ever been in her entire life. I felt a tremendous amount of pressure on me. If I accidentally dropped my dragon egg, Little Red probably wouldn't forgive me even if she became a ghost. Pressure? Who was the one who buried your egg in the sand just now? See if the rumors about the desert being able to turn an egg into a fried egg are true or not. The silly cat's comment didn't give me any pressure at all. I was just testing out the rumors. It wasn't like I was actually going to cook the egg. Right, it was said that griffins laid eggs as well. In that case, vulture demons as well. My imagination ran wild as I looked at the vulture demons circling above my head. Saliva, saliva. It's just that I haven't eaten in 3 days. Is there really a need to be like this? Yes, I was quite hungry, so hungry that I was about to faint. It wasn't that we didn't bring enough food with us. It was that after we left the snake god's mortal plane, not only did we throw away all of our food, we even burned all of our clothes. The reason? Just the poison god's reputation alone made me unhesitatingly throw away all of my daily necessities, especially anything that could possibly enter my mouth. This wasn't just because I didn't trust Voka enough. It was also because Voka was the poison god's divine kingdom. Perhaps many things would be harmless in his divine kingdom, but the mere existence of the concept of poison would be enough to destroy an entire country. This was not a lie to scare people, but a statement of experience learned from painful lessons in the past. Food brought from the kingdom of the dead was a deadly poison, and gold brought from the kingdom of heaven was excrement and poisonous snakes. All these fables and myths were based on the original. Many things in a divine kingdom were part of a divine concept. The concept of an order god's divine kingdom would be pure, which also meant that it would be more dangerous. I had just left the snake god's divine kingdom, so I didn't want to die in such an embarrassing manner like food poisoning. Little Red has had a stomachache for 2 days now. I'm no thick-skinned dragons. The poison that made her feel uncomfortable might actually be fatal to me. Are you certain that she didn't have indigestion because she thought that she ate one meal for an entire year? What Harlowe said made far too much sense. Cough, cough, let's talk about the present. Where should we go to find some food? I hadn't been impulsive to throw away food and supplies. As a veteran adventurer, I was confident that I could find food anywhere. Even in a lava hell, I would be able to catch fire snakes or fire tortoises to eat. However, the prerequisite was that I had to find something that could move. On the way here, I only saw sand. I also tasted a flock of demon vultures circling above us, waiting to eat rotting meat. The rotting meat's stench and parasites made it impossible for me to swallow them. However, No matter how disgusting a rotting meat was, it probably wouldn't taste so bad if it was still an egg. Finally, I drooled as I looked at the demon vultures above me. Perhaps I should catch one and interrogate it to see how many eggs it had, how many people it had in its family. As a senior mage teacher, it's my duty to remind you, as an acolyte, that there's a special list in demonology. Vulture demons and demon vultures are two different types of creatures. Vulture demons can be seen in the mortal plane, and are a special type of magical beast. Vulture demons are a type of demon's unique evolution. Although they're scavengers, they're still demons. Alright then, I did my best to think with my brain instead of my stomach for several seconds. Finally, I understood what Harlois meant. So much nonsense. So it turns out that demon vultures don't lay eggs. I looked at Harlois in disappointment. As she was a half-undead and a magical pet, she was completely capable of absorbing mana to feed on herself. Double the mana consumption was another reason why I was so hungry. I became even more dazed as I watched Harlois proudly act like a scholar. Right, don't they all say cat eggs and dog eggs? Harlois, you know how to lay eggs, right? I looked at Harlois with even more anticipation and love in my eyes. Perhaps it was because I had never treated her so gently before, but she suddenly became nervous. Did you forget about our soul connection? You want to eat slime elf soup? Don't even think about it. And then, the cat instantly grew wings and flew away. I'm so hungry. The next instant, my stomach once again took over control of my brain, and my trembling hand reached for the fried egg on my back. I meant dragon egg. It'll be fine to eat 2 bites, just 2 bites. Oh no, it'll definitely be fine. Don't suddenly change into a novel type. I was so hungry that my mind was hazy. Was it my system that was commenting on me, or was it my little remaining conscience? Just as I was struggling internally, Harlois' delighted voice entered my mind. Roland, there's a lone food up ahead. You've led me astray. There's an adventurer who's met with misfortune. Chapter 583. When I met with danger in the desert due to some accident, self-inflicted injury, I would never have expected that I would be the last to arrive in the temporary adventuring group that I had gathered. But when I considered my pitiful luck stat, this seemed to be only natural. In that case, it seemed like it was a wise decision for me to leave early and be the first to arrive. More than 20 days ago, Adam and Marguerite's journey to the North Pole finally came to an end. It wasn't that Adam finally admitted that he had no sense of direction, but rather that after overcoming a series of difficulties and obstacles, they achieved an epic achievement that no mortal could surpass. They successfully reached the impossible destination at the North Pole of the world, proving that the world of He was round and square. This is the legendary end of the Endless Sea? The boundary of the world? They passed through the obstacles of mountains, wrestled with the Yeti at the North Pole. That was what Adam believed, but the Yeti actually wanted to cook them, played around with the ice trolls, the trolls still wanted to cook them, raced with the white dragons and snow dragons, the dragons failed in their attempt to change their taste, passed through the ice wall of size that prevented the living from advancing, and finally arrived at the northernmost part of the world. However, what they saw was an unforgettable scene. It was a cliff, but it extended to an endless horizon. If one took a step forward, they would fall into the endless void. Even the seawater here had been frozen. Even Adam instinctively felt fear as he looked at the bottomless abyss at the edge of the cliff. Creator goddess Ike's understanding of the world was connected to the world. When the goddess of Ike believed that the world should be a cube, the world truly became a cube. Nobody knew what would happen if anyone took a single step forward. The magnificent glaciers created the most orderly ice plains and ice cliffs in the world. Below them was a bottomless abyss. Humans on the ice plains were no different from dust. The creator goddess was showing off her miraculous abilities. Even the insensitive Adam was stunned by this scene. Then, he took out a memory crystal and began recording the surrounding scenery. You can enjoy the scenery? Marguerite really thought that Adam had a stomachache. She couldn't believe that he would make a souvenir of the journey. Didn't he just walk wherever he went? He ate barbecued meat at the volcano and caught fish and prawns at the river. How could he still have the sensibility to appreciate the scenery? Oh, if that guy sees this, it will probably help his ice magic a little. This is the real ice Aeon. Adam's casual explanation made Marguerite inexplicably unhappy. I didn't see that Adam was so meticulous to his woman. But then, he smiled faintly. At a time like this, what else could he not accept? Men and women had their own way of getting along, and men also had their own way of getting along with each other. While Adam was running around with the camera, Marguerite began to build an ice house. It seemed that they were planning to spend the night here. After recording for a few seconds, Adam realized that it was a waste of effort. It was too cold here. The memory crystal only worked for a few seconds before it shattered. Since there was no path ahead, he hesitated whether he should take advantage of the fact that the sky wasn't dark yet and suggest to return as soon as possible. However, he felt that it was somewhat meaningless. He had worked so hard to get here, only to have to turn back. What is this? Then, he raised his head and discovered that there was a huge monument of white ice at the border. The top of the huge ice monument extended all the way into the clouds, but he didn't see it at all when he was far away. Only when he was close to the border of this world could he not ignore such an existence. It was very mysterious. This place is the end of the world, and there is no path ahead. However, in order to commend the brave ones who saw this monument for their fearlessness and sacrifice, and for the fearless ones to not take the boring path back, you can engrave your name and destination on the monument. You can engrave your name and destination on the monument, and I will use my supreme authority to send you there immediately. On the huge monument, other than the strange message, there were only 2 names left at a position about 1 meter high. The strange inscription on the monument and the lack of other people's messages made people suspect that this was a boring prank. However, the inscription on the monument was clearly written in an unknown language. Even an uncouth person like Adam could understand it. It was obviously a little strange. However, the inscription at the bottom of the inscription, which had a strange godly power, explained everything. Your mother, Aichi. Just like how programmers like to leave behind a few Easter eggs when creating a virtual world, the creator of all life, the goddess of creation, Aichi, who didn't leave behind any miracles, also left her handwriting at the border of this world. In this world's most difficult place to reach, there was a door that could lead to any corner of the world. One couldn't help but want to sigh. Perhaps the goddess Aichi wasn't as old-fashioned and solemn as the legends made her out to be. Perhaps she also once looked at her own work with pride, and then left her signature and footprints in satisfaction, leaving behind a surprise gift for the bravest adventurers. Adam and Marguerite felt an indescribable warmth in their hearts. This was a warmth that developed in their hearts. Adam and Marguerite instinctively believed the words on the monument, no matter how ridiculous the content was. They also instinctively knew that this was a chance for each person to travel to another world only once in their lifetime. However, no matter if it was the highest level of heaven or the lowest level of the bottomless abyss, it was possible to instantly travel to both worlds. No power or person would be able to stop all of this from happening. They also instinctively knew that this was an unexpected surprise left behind by the goddess of creation for their children. That was why they couldn't tell anyone about the truth of this place after they left. They could invite them to explore this place as well, but they couldn't tell them just what kind of surprise awaited them here. Without reaching this final step, they would never be able to see the inscription on the monument no matter what. Adam fell silent, while Marguerite smiled. The two of them exchanged glances and tacitly inscribed each other's names on the monument. Only the destination was identical. Adam Hahn, a freedom fighter who pursues adventure. I hope to reach the 100th level of the abyss, the Ashen Furnace's Dragontail Bar. Marguerite, a mage who pursues truth and love. I hope to reach the 100th level of the Abyss, the Ashen Furnace's Dragontail Bar. Time flashed, and the next instant, everyone in the Dragontail Bar's main hall stared in astonishment at the two people who suddenly appeared. The two of them exchanged glances. Adam laughed out loud, while Marguerite covered her mouth and smiled faintly. This was truly a pleasant surprise, a warm little gift that made everyone happy. The two of them looked at the bar in their memories. Demons and ghosts were still gathered there. The one-eyed succubus lady boss stared at them dumbfoundedly. Everything seemed to be the same as before, except for a familiar female voice that suddenly interrupted the two's joyous time. "Idiot Adam, Sister Marguerite, why are you only here now? I've been waiting for almost a month." A familiar person was already waiting for them at the familiar table. At this time, he was holding a glass of orange cocktail and looking at them proudly. Everyone else had already arrived at the gathering location. A certain summoner was still in the desert, enjoying the pleasant surprise of a disaster. But when he arrived at the gathering location, an even greater surprise was waiting for him. If one had to find out who was the first to arrive and had chosen the best path with great care, yet was still the last to arrive, apart from Roland's despair-inducing luck stat, the only explanation would be the world's evil will. Fresh meat. When the tiefling Cassandra Carolyn woke up from her unconsciousness, she saw blood-red eyes and strange shouts. A large mouth filled with saliva seemed to be opening right in front of her. Ferocious silver teeth were as blinding as an exorcist's blade. The saliva that represented hunger was about to drip onto her body. "Don't eat me. Tieflings aren't tasty at all. My meat stinks." At this moment, Cassandra truly wished that she could no longer understand the mortal plane's human language. She had finally managed to escape from her enemies, only to fall into the hands of a desert cannibal tribe. Cassandra was the daughter of the wealthy tycoon Ron, the owner of the desert oasis Haas. Due to the tiefling tribe's traditions, she had learned the mortal plane's language ever since she was young. She also received a scholar's education. Although she was only a tiefling, she was still the daughter of the Heart Oasis's ruler. Tiefling meant bastard in the Chaos Abyss. And this was indeed the case. Tieflings were all descendants of demons and devils. No matter what species their parents were, most of them would eventually listen to the Chaos Abyss's summons and come to the bottomless Chaos Abyss. In the Chaos Abyss, where the strong preyed on the weak, tieflings were considered to have excellent natural talent and individual power levels. However, it was quite difficult for them to show off. Most tieflings would die in battle, and the most common outcome would be to join a tiefling tribe. Perhaps due to the demonkin bloodline, it was quite difficult for tieflings to have any virtuous individuals. Thieves, bandits would forever be the backbone of a tiefling tribe. Meanwhile, the wealthy tycoon Ron was a legendary individual among tieflings. He advocated peaceful trade and developed trade route. Unknowingly, he became a world-famous major individual. Cassandra Carolyn was his only daughter and heir. She was also the most beautiful flower in the Zinta Desert. She was known as the most beautiful Black Pearl. Currently, Black Pearl Carolyn had an expression of fear. Apart from the cannibals who were jumping up and down in excitement, the black-masked and black-caped assassins had finally surrounded her. The assassins unsheathed their swords and scimitars. They couldn't leave a single person alive in this assassination attempt. Since they encountered Carolyn, it was only a matter of a corpse bag. Suddenly, the cannibal who was currently going through Carolyn's corpse bag started laughing. His laughter was filled with delight and insanity. He happily looked at the assassins around him and couldn't stop drooling, as if he was looking at a feast. More meat. Fresh meat. Chapter 584. People in our line of work should have realized this long ago. It's impossible to avoid getting your feet wet if you always walk by the river. The old tiefling assassin spoke to the young assassin with a sigh and calm expression. It was as if he had already seen through life and death. Meanwhile, in the background, there were two tiefling assassins tied to pillars. "It doesn't matter to you, old man. I'm still young, and I'm not married yet." The young assassin was unwilling to accept being instantly defeated on his first mission. Not only had he been defeated without even seeing his opponent's attack, since there was a difference in power levels, he had also been eaten by an ogre. His soul probably wouldn't even be able to rest in peace, and he probably wouldn't be able to return to the embrace of the great demon god Spak. Meanwhile, I was currently gulping down the jerky that I had worked so hard to obtain as I spoke in a muffled voice. "Black girl, what are they talking about?" Just like how the residents of the Chaos Abyss would always think that tieflings had strange accents. The Chaos Abyss language with a mortal plain accent seemed to be synonymous with country bumpkins. Only tieflings would find this accent to be familiar. But now, Caroline only felt suffocated when she heard this Chaos Abyss language with a mortal plain accent. This young warrior was quite powerful. The elite assassins that killed her guards were nothing in front of him. They were all instantly defeated. However, there was definitely something wrong with this person's interest. Caroline was clearly quite famous, but he didn't even look at her. He even started taking off the pants of the male assassins. Cough, cough, don't misunderstand. Roland was searching for food. The snacks that Caroline had on her wouldn't even be enough to fill his teeth. He then explained that he was a traveler who had met with misfortune. Of course, Caroline was so frightened that she wouldn't believe him, nor would she properly translate the tiefling dialect for him. She directly told the assassins about the word ogre, causing them to be on edge as they waited for the moment that they would be able to eat at Caroline's table. I had a headache now. I could speak the Chaos Abyss language, but the tiefling dialect had a lot of retroflex sound. Only demon descendants with curved tongues would be able to speak it well. It had nothing to do with magic, so I didn't know how to speak it at all. However, I learned from their conversation that there were many species living together in the 102nd level of the Chaos Abyss. Tieflings were the largest species here. Since this level was far too vast, there was no unified Chaos Abyss Lord here. There were more than 10 Chaos Lords here that maintained a subtle balance. Meanwhile, this little girl who had accidentally peed herself and was pretending that nothing had happened seemed to be the daughter of a tiefling Chaos Lord. Not only that, her territory seemed to be quite close to where I was. In that case, it was quite clear what I needed to do. I followed the little girl to her territory, got some supplies and a map, and then looked for a guide. It would be best if there was a teleportation gate that led directly to the 100th floor, but if there wasn't, climbing one more floor wouldn't be too scary. No, as a member of the Caroline family, how can you bring an unknown person to our oasis? I was a little speechless. Girl, I just saved you. How could you turn your back on me so quickly? Girl, do you still hold a grudge for scaring you just now? Fine, give me a direction and I'll find it myself. However, the dark-skinned, red-haired female tiefling fell silent. After a while, she said something to the assassin hanging on the rack. The assassin quickly replied with a few words, as if they were arguing about something. As they talked, the tiefling kept glancing in my direction. Even though I didn't understand the tiefling dialect, I was able to guess what the tiefling was trying to say. Girl, don't tell me that you don't even know where your home is? All right then, her dark-skinned face completely flushed red. Even her little tail seemed to have no energy left in it at all. It would seem that this little girl's skin was truly quite thin. I felt rather helpless. My growling stomach reminded me that the amount of dry food that a kind-hearted person gifted to me was still far from enough. I needed to hurry and continue on my way. 20 minutes later, such a scene appeared in the desert. I urged Milady to go on her way, while Milady led a group of black-caped assassins to lead the way. Just now, Milady and the assassins had reached an agreement. When we arrived at our destination, she would release all the young assassins apart from the leader. Milady and the assassins swore in the name of the great demon god Spak that they would abide by the rules of the experiment. Tieflings wouldn't dare to violate such an agreement. Since this was the mortal plane where so many tiefling tribes resided, I also revealed some of my demonized traits in order to avoid trouble. For example, I revealed the original sin demon god's demon wings, dragon scales, dragon claws, and other demonized traits that would be easily mistaken for others. And so, in their eyes, I was probably an unfortunate individual who was summoned by the Chaos Abyss. No matter if it was the assassins or Milady, they all had rather sympathetic expressions as they looked at me. There were countless tiefling compatriots who were trapped by the Chaos Abyss's bloodline every year. They believed that they were returning to their home and family, but what they actually received was a completely different hell. Actually, you could have completely hidden your demonized traits. There's no need for you to come to the Chaos Abyss. Caroline stopped halfway through her sentence, but she had an expression of pity. Little girl, what do you know? You're a native tiefling descendant of the Chaos Abyss. How could you possibly know about the unstoppable power of the Chaos Abyss's bloodline? A powerful tiefling who was capable of casually hiding his demonized traits would obviously be able to control his own bloodline. Such an existence would have a very high status in the tiefling tribe. And so, I casually agreed to Spak's demon god's oath, promising that I wouldn't do anything harmful to the oasis or the tiefling tribe. However, I actually didn't think much of it. The great demon god Spak's oath is unbreakable? Even if Spak appears in front of me right now, I'll still be able to say whatever I want. Although the great demon god Spak's title sounded quite frightening, the evil god Spak wasn't really an amazing individual at all. It was indeed quite amazing for a half-blood tiefling to ascend to the divine throne and obtain the divine concept of tiefling's protector. But in the entire universe, Spak would only be the ruler of the 245th level of the Chaos Abyss, a weak god with very few believers. His personal combat strength wouldn't be high, and he didn't have any special abilities or powerful allies. In fact, he wouldn't even be able to completely control his own level of the Chaos Abyss. The incarnations he sent out would always be killed by others, causing his power level to decrease. It could be said that he was an extremely failed weak god. But to tieflings, Spak was the greatest existence of all. Their faith in him was even higher than that of the main gods. This was because of the tieflings' special status. They were usually viewed as bastards by high-level existences of the Chaos faction. Some tieflings were descendants of demons, devils, and even evil gods. More than 90% of tieflings lived in the mortal plane. That's right, more than 90%. It could be said that the great majority of tieflings had once been residents of the mortal plane. They had dark skin, brown skin, special magical characteristics, and the stench of sulfur on their breath. Every tiefling's magical characteristics were different. The most common and obvious characteristics would be various horns and curved tails. Such magical characteristics couldn't be too obvious. Just looking at their physical characteristics, tieflings were similar to succubi. However, tieflings were much weaker and easier to fool. That was why many devils and demon lords kept tieflings as playthings. There were many reasons why tieflings would appear. Some evil god or devil lord would descend in the mortal plane, steal a physical body, transform into a demon, and leave behind a descendant. Some devils or demon armies would do evil by conquering a certain city. Some evil cultists would organize mass demonization rituals, some evil god schemes, some witches' children, and so on. However, tieflings were completely different from true devil's children or demon descendants. Original devils and demons were pure evil. They were killing machines that their elders had spent a great deal of effort to create. Evil gods' children were precious resources. If a tiefling was thrown into the mortal plane, it would definitely be used for some grand scheme. For example, in the legends, A certain evil god's child named Inside Story slaughtered all gods and demons until he finally ascended to the throne of the god of slaughter. Meanwhile, tieflings were only mortals that had been tainted with demonic energy. Their mothers had been corroded by demonic energy in their mother's womb, which caused them to have some devil characteristics. They were completely different from natural residents of the lower planes. However, other mortals wouldn't be able to tell this apart. Devil's children, unlucky ones, bringers of misfortune, and so on. Just thinking about it, there were countless filthy adjectives that could be used to describe tieflings. Most tieflings' mothers, most were single mothers, would even be labeled as witches or the type of person who had sex with devils. The gods' churches would never speak up for such people. Barbecuing witches wasn't something that only Earth could do. The birth of a tiefling descendant was a calamity to begin with. It would be quite difficult for tieflings' family members to have a good ending. It could be said that in the mortal plane, where everything was either black or white, most tieflings who were born with demon characteristics would have a nightmarish childhood. This wasn't only for the tieflings themselves, but also for their family members. And for the tieflings, this was only the beginning of their nightmare. Most tieflings would be unable to hide their demonized characteristic. They could think of ways to hide their horns and tails, but their skin color would be fatal. If a tiefling wanted to survive among humans, they would have to wear a mask and cloak for the rest of their lives. Not only would it be impossible for them to find a proper job or establish social relations, even if they dropped their cloak while passing through a city, it was highly likely that they would be burned to death by a mob. Even if there were some lucky tieflings who sacrificed a lot and used their outstanding natural talents to help many people, such as driving away a magical beast horde that was attacking a city, becoming the hero of the city and settling down there, their demon bloodline would still bring misfortune. It was highly likely that a long drought, an unstoppable natural disaster, or a sudden arrival of a divine job class member would cause the tiefling to become the bringer of misfortune and a schemer. The tiefling would then have to leave the mortal plane. If a tiefling walked through the mortal plane, no matter what they did, they would always be on guard and on guard. Yet, this type of prejudice couldn't be said to be completely wrong. Part of the tiefling's bloodline from the lower planes would make them impatient, easily angered, greedy, and lustful. Meanwhile, the tiefling's minor magic, such as invisibility, teleportation, and night vision abilities, were quite convenient when doing evil deeds. Their ugly and evil appearances made it quite difficult for tieflings to find a proper job. Due to the prejudice of outsiders and the tiefling's powerful natural talents, compared to humans, it was quite normal for tieflings to go down the wrong path. Robbers, thieves, and assassins would forever be the most popular jobs for tieflings. Even in the chaotic underground world, there were quite a few tieflings. Tieflings' long lifespans meant that no matter what the process was like, they would definitely experience the warmth and coldness of the human world. Their loved ones would die, and they would have no one to miss. Some scholars even suggested that the great majority of tieflings would answer the summons of the Chaos Abyss and enter the Chaos Abyss. This wasn't simply because they were unable to resist the summons of their bloodline. It was because they had already despaired of human society in the mortal plane. And even if tieflings entered the Chaos Abyss wasn't a good place to begin with. Pure demons viewed tieflings as nothing more than weaklings and playthings. Tieflings were nothing more than entering a deeper level of hell. In contrast, the descendants of the gods of chaos had the noble title of Asmo, which implied nobility. Asmo had different colored eyes, special golden skin, metallic hair, and a faint glow around them. However, it was quite easy for tieflings to find a job in a certain church or church. It would only be a matter of time before they became higher-ups in a church. And when they went out adventuring, they would mysteriously gain the trust and admiration of ordinary people. It would be far too easy for them to become celebrities and idols. Strictly speaking, angel bloodlines were also a type of Asmo. The treatment I received in the Bardi Empire back then was the best evidence. Of course, such treatment naturally made many tieflings feel uneasy, but I have to say, if the remnants of the previous dynasty want to compare their treatment to the second or third generation of the current dynasty, they should first ask their father in power if he agrees. Cough. I seem to have accidentally said too much. Getting back to the main topic, the reason why countless tieflings devoutly believed in him was because the great demon god Spak had made a grand vow to save tieflings like himself. Spak had performed many miracles in the mortal plane, sending out incarnations and god envoys to save his own tieflings. However, the Order gods had chased him around like dogs. Perhaps this was rather unreliable, but for tieflings who had been oppressed by other species, the existence of a guardian god was already excellent news. The tieflings greatly respected and believed in the great demon god Spak, far more than any other species. Naturally, Spak's status among the tieflings was also greatly improved. There was a reason why I knew so much about tieflings. Strictly speaking, back when Eliza had been demonized in the River Styx, she had also been a tiefling. For a long time, she had been a pure tiefling. And, since the underground world was a land of exiles from the surface world, the tieflings numbered about as many as all the other countries combined. However, Eliza had received far too much favor from the Chaos Abyss. In the end, she had been demonized too much and became a half-demon. With a single thought, she could demonize even more deeply and become a true demon at any time. She was basically the daughter of the Chaos Abyss. Don't think that transforming into a demon would be easy. For tieflings who had given up on being human, there would be a price to pay in order to transform into a demon. Since the tieflings had enough power, they would need to at least obtain the pure bloodline of a powerful demon or devil. This meant that they would need to make the residents of the lower planes bleed greatly. This was no easy task. Now that I thought about it, since the Chaos Abyss had its own will, that meant that the Chaos Abyss favor was equivalent to Cynthia's favor. Since Cynthia had always been looking after Eliza, that meant that she had also been watching over us. It would seem that there were still many hidden secrets from the past. Perhaps Eliza had been Cynthia's hidden nail and ticking time bomb. She would be able to trap us at a critical moment. Shouldn't I thank Cavendish for tricking Cynthia? Otherwise, this would have been truly troublesome. Desert areas were quite hot during the day and quite cold at night. However, this wasn't a desert in the mortal plane. There were 3 suns in the sky, and it was said that a single night would last less than 2 hours. Just this alone made people feel like they had entered a living hell. Not long ago, I had been in a damp and dark swamp. Now I was in a sunny desert. The tremendous difference in temperature was indeed quite uncomfortable. TSK, this should be fine. There are many places in the Chaos Abyss that are far worse than this. As far as I could remember, this wasn't much at all. Some Chaos Abyss planes were filled with deadly poisonous gas. Some Chaos Abyss planes were filled with flames and oceans. Some Chaos Abyss planes didn't even have air. There were only sandstorms everywhere. These Chaos Abyss planes' living environments were already quite good. At the very least, they were much better than the Earth Elemental Plane. When I thought about the Earth Elemental Plane, I suddenly recalled a certain existence whose name I couldn't say. Suddenly, an ominous premonition appeared in my heart. No way, I didn't call that guy over. At this moment, after passing several hills, the brightest pearl in the 102nd level of the Chaos Abyss, the Heart Oasis, appeared before us. Chapter 585. Heart, the capital of Yellow Sand, was the only oasis in the surrounding several thousand kilometers. Heart was the only oasis for all 3 major trade routes that crossed the desert. It was truly a golden route. It was impossible to tell how much it would cost to pass through Heart every year. Previous rulers of the Yellow Sand capital had done this as well. But after the magnate Ron took over the city, he reduced the taxes to 0. While the income from the taxes was greatly reduced, more than 10 times the number of merchant caravans came to Heart. Soon, this foolish policy became known as the reason why the Yellow Sand capital was able to flourish. Perhaps some people would say that this was just a simple strategy. However, there were many times when a good policy would end up being bad. What failed wasn't creativity, but execution. In order to truly benefit from this policy, I would also need to get rid of all the other factors that prevented merchant caravans from coming to Hart. I would need to eliminate bandits, attack competitors, regularly eliminate magical beasts, and establish resting spots in the desert. None of these would be easy tasks. On my way here, I had already heard Cassandra boast about her father's great achievements. However, this city didn't seem as friendly as she described it to be. As I strolled around the Yellow Sand capital, I felt that everyone was staring at me rather harshly. Even the black staff-wielding guards were glaring at me in an unfriendly manner. I didn't do anything, did I? I finally realized what was wrong when I saw that everyone was looking at me warily. Isn't this city being too xenophobic? That's not it. It's just that the last 2 times Hart was almost conquered were thanks to information provided by foreign spies. Now, an unfamiliar outsider has appeared on the streets, and he's obviously a warrior. Even though Cassandra Carolyn had entered her own city, she still wrapped herself in a thick cloak, as if she was hiding from something. Then why wasn't I interrogated when I entered? That's because the other few times when Hart was attacked from both inside and outside, the scouts were all local tieflings. Those tieflings finally discovered that tieflings don't have much loyalty as long as they pay a good price. Tieflings are much cheaper than scouts from other tribes. Alright then, I could pretty much guess why Cassandra Carolyn was still hiding even after entering her own city. Was she worried that the spies still hadn't given up on her? In other words, she didn't believe that the ordinary city guards could protect her. However, being stared at like this wasn't a good thing either. After I turned a corner, 2 dragon horns appeared on my head, and a pair of dragon wings appeared on my back. I also let off some of the aura of the Chaos Abyss. Instantly, the guards' defensive gazes disappeared. However, why did the appearance of this creature, which had a pair of blindfolded eyes, a pair of wings on its back, and 2 horns on its head, seem so familiar? I really wanted to make an old joke about how you're all seeking your own death, but I felt like I was getting bored of it. Besides, it seemed like nobody here understood what I was seeing. Adventurer, can you send me home? My family should be looking for me. They will reward me handsomely. Blinking her eyes, Cassandra tried to recall her etiquette teacher's lesson on diplomacy. She wanted to use her most sincere words to invite Mr. Blind Ogre to visit her home, but in fact, she was cursing in her heart. You actually scared me to the point of peeing. You actually dared to scare a lady. See how my father will deal with you. She wouldn't go so far as to repay kindness with evil, but if she didn't find a chance to take revenge, Caroline, who had always had a smooth sailing life, would feel wronged. No, it's too troublesome. Where's the most famous tavern, bar, and restaurant in this area? Even without seeing the red-haired girl's flashing eyes, I knew what she was planning to do. Based on her personality, it could range from a harmless yet disgusting naughty child's prank to a vile attempt to kill someone to keep them quiet. I refused, not because I was afraid of this girl, but rather because it was better to avoid unnecessary trouble. Yep, it definitely wasn't because I was so hungry that I didn't want to move. How could these ordinary restaurants possibly compare to my family's? My family's chef is a super chef hired from the most famous restaurant in Rain City. All of my food is purchased from thousands of kilometers away. Yep, I'll go. In front of my stomach, I would rather not care about my face or anything like that. Suddenly, an evil wind attacked me. I couldn't help but shiver as if some vicious beast was staring at me. I suddenly raised my head to see a figure in the sky that I had just met 2 days ago. Lasnina? Compared to a week ago, Lasnina seemed rather disheveled. The thick dark bags under her eyes indicated that she had been suffering from insomnia for a long time. Her long hair was messy and uncombed, and her originally beautiful appearance had been reduced yet again. The bandages and bloodstains on her body indicated that she was still unable to break free from the effects of the stare of the Hell God. Perhaps this was also why she was unable to sleep peacefully. Damn it, did I waste too much time in the desert? I didn't believe that I had been followed. No matter how profound a prophecy spell was, it would be impossible for her to find any traces of me in the river of fate. Tracking my footprints in the desert would be even more of a joke. In that case, I must have stayed in this level for far too long. She was unwilling to give up after following me here, and was searching for me in every city. Lasnina's carelessness in floating above the oasis naturally attracted the attention of others. The Air Knight and the mage riding on the giant bat had already approached her, but they still hadn't come into contact with Lasnina yet. The Devil Lord Carwins casually waved her hand, causing a chain of lightning to strike down and ignite all the Air Knight. Even the black-robed mage who was wearing a magical shield was unable to resist at all as he was instantly reduced to ashes. This evil invader used such an obvious method of attack to express her undisguised evil intentions. The city's alarm bells instantly rang, and the entire city entered a state of war. Even more powerful mages and city guards all walked out of their own fortresses and mage towers. Numerous offensive magic spells took form on top of the mage towers. As the most important business city in the area, how could Hart not be heavily guarded? However, Lasnina seemed to completely ignore the threat before her. She simply silently chanted her own incantation. Black magic began to spread, and the clouds in the sky were dyed black. Then, they began to transform into dark green clouds. Judging from the amount of magic gathered, this spell would soon surpass the definition of a forbidden spell in the world. Don't let her use that spell. It wasn't that there weren't any mages who knew what was good for them. If this dark green curse spell landed, it was likely that Hart, the capital of the desert, would be nothing but sand in the future. That's how she chased us all the way here? Just how many cities did she destroy on her way here? I didn't believe that Lasnina knew that I just happened to be in this city. Otherwise, it would be quite foolish of her to immediately cast a powerful spell. This type of forbidden spell was incredibly powerful and had a large area of effect. It would be far less threatening to powerful individuals than a 9-circle single-target spell. In that case, Lasnina simply wanted to destroy this entire city. I don't know where you are, but as long as I keep destroying cities one by one, you'll appear before me sooner or later. Perhaps Lasnina wanted to vent her anger, or perhaps she wanted to cut off Lasnina's ability to attack her, or perhaps she was considering how naive Lasnina's identity as a holy knight was. Over the past week, while Roland had been in a state of confusion, the insane Devil Lord had become the scariest natural calamity in the mortal plane. Previously, due to the Snake God's existence, the Chaos Abyss's kingdom had still been faintly orderly. That situation had obscured the true appearance of the Chaos Abyss. From a certain standpoint, everything that happened in this ownerless Chaos Abyss was the true Chaos Abyss, a jungle paradise where the strong preyed on the weak. In the countless levels of the Chaos Abyss, people and cities would be destroyed every moment for various reasons. Oftentimes, the lives and deaths of the weak would be nothing more than a form of entertainment for the strong. Curse her! My lord, please have mercy and spare us. Why? Why is this happening? Why are you attacking us? Lasnina smiled in delight as she listened to the ants' screams and angry roars. If it wasn't for the fact that she was in a hurry to find Lasnina, she would have even cursed the ants so that they wouldn't die for so long. Perhaps spending an entire year listening to their screams and curses would be a good vacation for her. A reason? Did she even need a reason to casually stomp a bunch of ants to death? Did she even remember how many annoying mosquitoes she had slapped to death? Perhaps some people would despise the existence of order. But when even the most basic order no longer existed, when there were no restrictions on those who possessed martial power, and when the strong didn't believe that the weak were the same kind of existence, it was only natural that anything could happen. A large-scale massacre? Was it possible to find a witness for something that didn't happen? Everyone had died? That meant that the dead couldn't testify? Destroying peaceful and neutral medical facilities and diplomatic embassies? I accidentally used the wrong information from a map from 10 years ago. Let me verbally express my regret. Creating famine and refugees? Oh, that was truly an unfortunate accident. Still, it was their fault for having such an evil master. Apology and compensation? How would that be possible? I already said that it was an unfortunate accident. Since it was an accident, there was no need to think too much about it. Yep, let me verbally express my regret. War crimes? Haha, youngster, no matter which world you were in, war would always occur. You just might not know about it. When the strong lost all restraints on their power, when simple use of martial power would be able to obtain tremendous benefits, even the most terrifying of evil deeds would become a daily occurrence. Furthermore, when evil deeds became a daily occurrence, killing and destruction would no longer be related to personal benefits or the country's name. Killing and destruction would become nothing more than simple entertainment. Those war machines that were already addicted to killing and destruction might not only destroy themselves in the end. This was the 37th city that Lasnina had intended to destroy in the past 5 days. From the bottom of her heart, she had already given up on searching for Roland, as it would be like searching for a needle in a haystack. It was highly likely that Roland had already left this dimension. However, the endless destruction and screams made her feel as if she was being poisoned with pleasure. Watching these ants beg for mercy before being stomped to death made her feel comfortable all over. It was as if the injuries on her body had become much more comfortable. For Lasnina, who had fallen into darkness for countless years, the judgment from her soul didn't awaken her conscience that she had long since abandoned. Instead, it made her eager to pass on her pain to even more weaklings. Ha, cry, scream, and then all of you can die. Her hysterical laughter echoed in the skies above the city. The next instant, a transparent ice sword suddenly pierced through her heart. Lasnina turned around with an expression of disbelief. However, the ice sword that had pierced through her heart was burning fiercely. The assassin that suddenly appeared out of the clouds had a pair of gorgeous wings. The fiery wings of the war angel were emitting astonishing heat and holy light. The assassin furiously roared and directly pushed away the dark green cursed cloud. The killing intent within the sword was like a calamity that could destroy the world. Lasnina, receive your judgment. Chapter 586. Lasnina, you must die. My temporary bandages of cloth had already been torn to shreds. Although I couldn't open my bloody eyes, it was impossible for my thin eyelids to block my soul-piercing divine eyes. In my world, countless dead souls were currently surrounding Lasnina. These souls were currently using their empty eye sockets and helpless screams to accuse me of Lasnina's crimes. Just how many people have died at her hands? A mysterious anger burned in my heart. Even though I was also an executioner whose hands were stained with blood, I still couldn't accept such a slaughter. Every life should be valuable. Those who took lives would have to bear the weight of the dead. No matter how noble or how valuable one's reason for killing was, it was impossible to hide the fact that killing was one of the vilest actions of all. If you chose to use slaughter to solve your problem, then you would have to bear an equal amount of sin. One day, evil villains whose hands were stained with blood would be judged, no matter which dimension they were in, and no matter what reason they had for killing. Killing for the sake of national benefits and glory? How laughable! How could there be any justice in killing? Killing for the sake of satisfying one's own desires? That was the lowest and most despicable of third-rate villains. I felt even more disgusted than filthy maggots. Lasnina, die like a lowly insect. I furiously swung my ice sword with a high-purity holy light that would harm both enemies and myself. Harlow's pitiful screams echoed in my ears, but at this time, I could only tell her to bear with it for a while longer. Lasnina's ice sword viciously sliced at Lasnina's beautiful face and body. Every sword strike burned Lasnina's devil lord limbs like the sun. However, Lasnina's distorted face was laughing hysterically amidst the flames. I've finally found you. No matter how many insects I kill, I'm never satisfied." Lasnina's limbs were instantly reduced to ash by the holy fire. However, her maniacal laughter didn't stop. As expected, my pain is only you, your soul, your blood. Only then can I be satisfied. Not far away in the sky, the ash reassembled itself. The perfect Lasnina instantly recovered. Her eyes were filled with lust as she stared at me. No, she wasn't in perfect condition. Judging from her weakened aura, she was clearly injured. The high-density holy flames that can instantly kill a demon noble can only do this? However, my following counterattack didn't give me the time to sigh at how powerful my opponent was. In just the blink of an eye, the sky was filled with twisted magical runes. An immeasurable amount of mana was flowing through these runes. Mana that had transformed into plasma kept leaking outward. The sky of the Chaos Abyss was being torn apart, and magical creatures from other dimensions were itching to attack. I could sense that countless magical eyes were staring at me. In the next moment, those malicious monsters turned into black liquid and flowed out of the void. As soon as they appeared in this world, they turned into distorted monsters. It was a pitch-black monster with countless holes all over its body. Its constantly twisting body was covered in all kinds of magic runes. I could sense that this was a pure amalgamation of curses. It was a magical creature that had been compressed together to form curses and witchcraft. Ah! Lasnina was the one who screamed in pain. Her famous magic sword had pierced through her only eye. The next instant, Lasnina, who had just gouged out her own eye, crushed it with her hand. She had an even more twisted smile as she looked at me, as if she was saying, "I can't see anymore. That special ability of yours that requires sight is no longer effective against me." Of course, I didn't believe that Lasnina would become completely blind. It was likely that those cursed magical creatures were her third or fourth eye. However, her unhesitatingly self-mutilating meant that she had gone completely insane. Or perhaps I should say that the Devil Lords had been insane from the very start. I took a deep breath and rewrapped the cloth around my eye. Such an opponent wouldn't be easily defeated by hot-bloodedness. There was an absolute difference in power level between us. Charging forward with hot-bloodedness would be no different from suicide. I had dealt with many undying and undying creatures. However, Lasnina's undying nature was foundationally different from that of Omdaroken and the others. For the Devil Lords, their curses, jealousy, lust, betrayal, and violence represented the purest negative emotions of intelligent creatures. They didn't have any divine concepts or divine concept. However, just as intelligent creatures would definitely have negative emotions, as long as intelligent creatures existed, they would naturally have an endless source of power. Since ancient times, the number of Devil Lords that had died due to external factors could be counted on one hand. The Devil Lords who were replaced would either be replaced by the next generation, or a new sin would replace the old sin. The most ancient Devil Lords had all lived from the very beginning of creation to the modern era. They were the symbol of undying and undying. Meanwhile, the new generation of Devil Lords, even the youngest of the Devil Lords, Lasnina, would be completely different from ordinary powerful devils. When I created my 7 original sins, I had researched their natures. They weren't as undying and undying as they claimed to be. Only the Creator Goddess was truly undying. Strictly speaking, although the Devil Lords represented the original sins that were undying, the Devil Lords weren't undying. Otherwise, it would be impossible for the Devil Lords to be replaced. The Lord of Curses? Strictly speaking, it should be the Lord of Jealousy. You're the foundation of your existence because of your malice towards other individuals that are stronger than you. Hatred, jealousy, and hatred are all your food. I closed my eyes as I prepared my trump card. Since I knew that my opponent was likely to be a Devil Lord, of course I would make preparations beforehand. In theory, there were only two methods to completely kill a Devil Lord like Lasnina. The first method was to use the normal method of attacking, killing her over and over again. This would cause her to use up all of her power in the process of reviving. Naturally, she would be forced to return to the Devil Lord's original position. During that period of time, the empty position of the Lord of Curses would cause all devils to go insane. If she couldn't quickly awaken, her position might be replaced by another devil. The second method was to use a special attack method to directly attack Lasnina's soul and origin, either destroying or sealing her. This method was even more direct than the first method. The first method would require a power level that surpassed Lasnina's. A main god would probably be enough. The second method would require a power level and special abilities that surpassed Lasnina's. Both methods would be incredibly difficult. Otherwise, I wouldn't have immediately used my trump card, Stare of the Hell God. The Stare of the Hell God was a direct attack on the soul. This was a dimensional attack that involved karma and fate. If Lasnina hadn't been able to withstand the Stare of the Hell God, I would have been able to directly replace her with another Lord of Curses. Currently, it would be impossible for me to forcefully kill Lasnina. All I did was ask her to go home and sleep, which was really displeasing. Since I intended to completely kill her, I only had one choice, even if I had to pay an uncomfortable price. Conservation, I need your power. Unlike the Mortal Planes, Incarnation Wars, and Proxy Wars, the Chaos Abyss was a place where high-level existences could use their full power. Whenever the Chaos Abyss main gods started fighting, there would naturally be gods that perished, as well as innocent victims. While Roland and Lasnina were engaged in a bitter battle, a Devil Lord and Sailor, who was currently in the 101st and 100th levels of the Chaos Abyss, received news of Roland's arrival. Due to certain unexpected events, Roland's value in the Devil's eyes had increased yet again. 3 of the 5 Devil Lords were sent out at the same time. Even if they lost track of Roland, there were still 2 Devil Lords and 1 Sailor who were still trying to kill him. If high-level existences were about the same power level, their undying abilities, divine kingdoms, armies, and regenerative abilities would all become reinforcements. It would be quite easy for a battle of attrition that could last for 1 or 2 months. The Battle of the Hades had been fought for several years now, with very few exceptions. For example, Emperor Yongye would be impossible to kill without killing his army. This meant that as long as the devils moved quickly, it was theoretically quite possible for them to catch up to Roland. But suddenly, near the entrance to the 101st level, the Lord of Pride appeared in front of him with the exact same face as his target, Roland. The Lord of Pride, Aster, was delighted at first, but then paused for a moment before revealing an expression of shock and despair. "Cavendish, why are you here?" Compared to 7 years ago, the Chaos Abyss Prince didn't seem to have changed at all. He simply yawned. "I'd like to ask you something. This is the demon's territory. You can't even defend your own territory, so why are you here? Could it be that you're plotting something?" Chapter 587. Conservation was a powerful undead emperor. She was a genius who had reached the level of main god by herself. She was a rare, unlucky individual. During her battle against Roland, she received inspiration. She used her research results in the field of energy to successfully reach a level that no one had ever reached before. And just as she was about to proudly start her own business, she met Roland again. In that battle, Conservation hadn't even been able to recover to her peak condition, as she hadn't even had the chance to use her ace card. She was severely injured by Roland's shameless tactic. After that, she absorbed the aura of the Hades to recover, which resulted in her being restricted by the laws of the Hades and becoming a part of the Hades. This wasn't Roland's plan at all. Nor did he expect that conservation would instinctively absorb the aura of the Hades after being injured. Natural traps that were born by accident were also the hardest to guard against. Since some things had already happened, one could only admit that they were unlucky. The advantage of intelligent people was that they would rarely waste time on insignificant problems. They would know how to beat around the bush. And as a mage, stupidity was the most unacceptable talent. You wouldn't be able to become a mage if you had low intelligence. Since conservation was an undead emperor, her intelligence couldn't possibly be lower than 30. She soon accepted the fact that she would never be able to leave this world again. Yep, soon enough, she used several hundred forbidden spells to cleanse this world, confirming that this world was indestructible. She then theoretically confirmed that even if this world was destroyed, she would die with it. She finally calmed down. Roland, you still have the guts to come see me. Of course. Just think about it, it's quite easy to kill me. But if I'm dead, would there still be any reason for this world to exist? As this bug-like world existed, this world would only exist as long as Roland was alive. And as long as this world ceased to exist, then conservation, who was bound to this world, would meet a theoretically impossible end. Alright, judging from the results, Roland had indeed done a wonderful job. But from an ethical standpoint, this seemed like a crime no matter how one looked at it. After conservation calmed down, Roland began a difficult yet effective negotiation with conservation. The process went something like, "Kill me if you have the guts. Kill me. Kill me. Haha, you don't dare to kill me, right? You don't dare to kill me, right? Tisk, I'm dead, you're dead, I'm still alive and well. Why is this world so beautiful? The weather today is really good. Ahem, that's enough fun. Let's get down to business. Let's start with the rent. Water, electricity, and rent. Are you planning to pay with your body? Or do you want to pay in cash? How does it feel to camp in the wild? I have a mobile villa here, but it's a little expensive. Of course, if you have any daily necessities or luxury goods, I can buy them for you." Perhaps it looked like someone was maliciously trying to increase the number of words, but if he didn't repeat these words, it would be difficult to restore Roland's despicable appearance at that time. Of course, Roland was angry at being viciously beaten up by conservation. Since he had a chance to negotiate with conservation that he wouldn't lose no matter what, Roland was naturally as despicable as possible. Of course, conservation could choose not to accept. But the sly Roland would unhesitatingly disappear for an entire day as long as the negotiation didn't go well, and then reappear the next day as if nothing had happened. This was a clear indication of something. I don't care. At most, I'll just give up on this small world. What about you? Are you intending to stay away from the world forever? Live the rest of your life alone in this small world? Alone in a pitch-black dimension, facing countless years, and worrying every day that I'll suddenly die and bring your world to an end. TSK, TSK, TSK. That's probably even worse than being exiled to another dimension. When the bargaining chips of both sides were completely unequal, in a way, it would become a one-sided extortion. Even if Roland hadn't been so reckless, conservation would have accepted this result sooner or later. After all, there was nothing she could do about it now. But Roland's actions not only increased the enmity between conservation and Roland, it also helped conservation to calm down even faster and reach an agreement faster. Actually, just the fact that Asso had been forced to his death by Roland had already caused conservation and Roland to become mortal enemies. Every time they met, they would fight to the death. Even if they stopped fighting now, it would still be impossible for them to establish a friendly relationship. Roland agreed to all of conservation's conditions. He would bring the floating fortress Yongye City into this world for conservation to live in. He would also bring more of conservation's subordinates into this world as servants. He would also purchase some female daily necessities. Since the unfortunate undead emperor was unable to leave the mortal plane, she could only make these conditions. But Roland's conditions were quite excessive. I'll provide you with the research topic and materials. You'll do it yourself, but you'll share all the research results with me. You'll create this world and become its manager. Yep, you'll manage it for me, and you'll help out when necessary. Relax, I don't need a main god like you to help out with any ordinary opponent. And so, Roland now had a personal magical consultant who hated him but absolutely needed to pray for his safety. The arenas that trapped the undead emperor were all constructed by Conservation's servants. The current bug-like world seemed like it was about to become an undead country. Of course, Conservation could choose not to cooperate. In that case, Roland would only need to cancel his regular visits, which would allow Conservation to enjoy being isolated from the rest of the world. And since he was able to leave this demiplane as he pleased, Roland wasn't worried that Conservation would do anything to him. She's just like me from back in the day, but even more pitiful than I was. Harlow's evaluation of Conservation made Harlow's mysteriously sad, especially the part about, if I die, you die, and if you die, I'll still be alive and happy, and now, it seemed that it was time for Conservation to fulfill her contract. It was also time for her to help out. I opened up my mystical world. A gigantic arena surrounded me and Lasnina. This time, not only were there undead spectators, there was also a main god-level undead emperor in the sky of darkness. Conservation, I need your power. I refuse. What? Hey, that's not how the script was written. How could you ruin my plan at such a critical moment? I raised my head and saw that the ethereal figure floating in midair had already materialized. Her beautiful face was covered by a black veil, and her face was completely pale. However, her eyes were filled with undisguised hatred. With just a single glance, I understood. Harlow's had gone insane. She intended to die together with me. As expected, her previous compromise was only to numb your senses. Women are creatures whose emotions are even more important than their lives. Silly cat, why are you pretending to be an expert? At most, you're a female cat, not a woman. But for some reason, perhaps I was fated to be in love. Recently, there had been so many women who wanted to kill me. That's not what fated to be in love means. Cough, if there's a problem, don't always blame luck. Please first look at your own character. You're so skilled at attracting hatred, so don't blame the pitiful god of fate. 2 pairs of eyes were staring at me, one from the front and one from above. 2 beautiful women were intending to die together with me, without a doubt. I suddenly felt rather excited. Hey, isn't this the wrong style? We're about to die, so why are you getting excited? Can't you be a little more serious with your narration? It's going to kill me. I didn't waste any more time. At that moment, Conservation entered a high-speed spellcasting state and cast several spells. Some of them healed and buffed Lasnina, while some of them cast negative undead curses on me. Even though she knew that spatial magic wouldn't be able to stop me from leaving, she still cast dimensional anchors, speed reduction spells, and so on. You damned bitch, when I get out of here, I'm going to lock you up for half a year. Then you need to survive first. Hee. Conservation smiled like a blooming night lily, intelligent and confident. This was the first time I had ever seen her smile. It was rather cute, but she was looking forward to my death, which made it difficult for me to be happy. Crazy woman. I didn't teleport away. Instead, I suddenly shouted loudly after raising my hands high in the air. Fire at me! At that moment, all the mage towers and cannons in Yongye City lit up. Countless cannons and fireballs all shot towards Conservation. There was no helping it. I wanted to attack Lasnina as well, but I had already set a keyword for her, so I could only attack the target I had set. You two are so dirty, the sky was filled with fireworks. Even Harlow's couldn't bear to watch anymore. It would seem that the two undead emperors who had already signed a large number of alliance agreements with each other had always wanted to kill each other. I didn't have the time to play around with the silly cat anymore. After Losnina confirmed that the powerful existence in the sky was truly at odds with me, she unhesitatingly launched a fatal ambush.